Good evening and welcome to this workshop meeting of the Town of Oakville's Council. We are meeting as Committee of the Whole tonight. And Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
None for this evening.
Council, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none, Madam Clerk. Our first and only item is our presentation by, or at least our discussion of our Transportation Master Plan, and we're going to lead off with opening comments from the Commissioner, Phoebe Fu. Ms. Fu?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Bitterton and Member Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome our new Manager of Transportation Planning, Kilio Barakzai, who's been with us just under a month. He will be the project manager for this project moving forward. Kilio brings a wealth of experience in transportation planning and project management from his time with Metrolinx and the region of Durham previously. With that, we're here tonight to present the Transportation Master Plan, an important step in planning for Oakville's future. This workshop provides the opportunity for Council to dive into the details of the plan, ask questions, and provide us with feedback. As this is a workshop meeting, there will be no delegations. However, the public will have an opportunity to participate in the public consultation scheduled for May 27th. And finally, we expect to bring the report back to Council in the fall for final consideration. As you know, Master Plan advances Council's long-term strategy and vision through short, medium, and long-term planning. As demonstrated in the recent Park, Recreation, and Library Master Plan and the Fire Master Plan, and now in this Transportation Master Plan, these plans identify the needs to accommodate future growth, map out the town's programs, services, and infrastructure for the future. The insight from these three master plans are incorporated into the 10-year capital forecast and prioritized during our annual budget process. Master plans are also essential for our development charges bylaw and DC funding, as the growth component identifying these plans form the basis of our DC background study and DC bylaw. Additionally, master plans must balance the town's infrastructure renewal program, which is primarily guided by our asset management strategies. Before I pass over to our consultant, I would like to acknowledge and thank all the staff team, including planning, finance, asset management, Oakville Transit, Roads and Works, and Parks and Open Space, who have provided support along the way. And not just their input into the plan, but the great work that they do day to day. I want to acknowledge the community at large and many stakeholders who participated in completing the surveys and attended our open engagement sessions. At this time, I'd like to introduce our consultant, Ray Backey, who will be presenting tonight. Many of you know Ray. He is the Senior Vice President of Transportation and at RJ Burnside, with over 40 years of experience in helping municipalities deliver transportation plans across Ontario and abroad. He is leading the consultant team to deliver this master plan. So over to you, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of Council. I'm happy to be leading you through this workshop presentation today for the Oakville Transportation Master Plan. We have about 30 slides, and they summarize the process we've been through to date and our findings and our next steps. And we look forward to any discussion that you may want to hold following the presentation. So next slide. Actually, next slide, please. So in the recent past, the town has undertaken transportation master plans on roughly a 5 to 10 year cycle to identify transportation needs to address the planned growth. The last two master plans in 2018 and 2013 were to address the growth to the year 2031. The current master plan is intended to identify growth related transportation needs through to the year 2051. We are looking to employ evidence-based approaches to identify and prioritize community needs, to present multimodal transportation solutions, to address mobility needs and town policy objectives. to incorporate equity and solutions into our solutions by addressing barriers to mobility and inform the financial processes and future budgets. And so ultimately, we'll be updating, we'll be presenting the identifying studies to be included and future studies to be included and future master plans to be updated in 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please. As Ms. Fu had mentioned, as Commissioner Fu had mentioned, the master plans build on the goals and the policies of the official plan and are guided by the strategic plan to define sorry about that, to define program-specific topics, and in this particular case, the Transportation Master Plan and transportation needs. The master plans implement town strategies, they help guide town decisions and provide specific actions to be completed over the time period that we were referring to, 2051. This Transportation Master Plan creates a long-term vision for the town, and the TMP, or Transportation Master Plan, provides recommendations and guidelines for policies, programs, infrastructure improvements up to 2051. This study is being developed in coordination with the Halton Region's ongoing integrated master plan, which is a region-wide water, wastewater, and multimodal transportation strategy. The regional plan will provide strategies, policies, and tools required to meet the water, wastewater, and transportation infrastructure to 2051. The regional plan focuses on multimodal regional transportation networks, so regional road rights-of-way for transit active transportation, in addition to accommodating cars and commercial vehicles. The region's proposed strategies to meet future needs will be presented to the public in the spring of 2025, and the recommended programs and policies and guidelines will be presented to Council, Regional Council, in September 2025. Sorry, the summer of 2025. Next slide, please. Thank you. Many transportation needs and improvements have been identified through previous master plans. The TMP has undertaken analysis to reconfirm previously identified improvements and improvements that have not yet been identified, utilizing a range of data sources, including travel demand forecasts from the joint best planning estimates as input to the Oakville sub-area of the Halton transportation model. So the model provides a tool for forecasting future travel demand on the road network, and that information will be compared to is compared to the capacity associated with the existing and planned transportation system. In the report that accompanies this presentation in your package, you will see an assessment, a screenline assessment that provides a comparison of the future volumes to the capacity of the road system along what we call screen lines. So they're basically barriers like the creek system or the rail system, and gives us an opportunity to assess the volume to capacity and how much of a need there is in particular parts of the town. We have also looked at collision data analysis and identified the safety hotspots or safety areas of safety concern. We looked at big data sources to define travel patterns, and we've used app-based information like Streetlight and Strava and information from TELUS to assist us with our understanding of the travel patterns within the town. We also have information related to the neighborhood profiles through Environics Prism database. So I know the town has a subscription to that. We've leveraged that information to have an understanding of how traffic conditions vary from neighborhood to neighborhood, and the characteristics of the profile of the population varies between the communities. We have looked at equity needs through the consultation with community groups, and we have identified findings and policy objectives, including those related to climate change response, and housing and green initiatives. Next slide, please. This Transportation Master Plan has been developed in accordance with the municipal class environmental assessment process. The process includes consideration of alternative solution strategies, an evaluation process that considers a range of criteria, including environment and climate change implications, has prescribed consultation requirements. It results in recommendations through an evaluation process, and there are requirements for documenting and circulating the findings. Next slide, please. This TMP evaluation process has included criteria consistent with the municipal class EA process, but also includes criteria that reflect town policy. The town criteria include objectives within the main categories for the assessment of alternative solutions: transportation service, transportation equity, climate change and natural heritage, growth and economic development, livability and cost, and indicators that are qualitative or quantitative measures or metrics used to assess the performance of alternative strategies. Next slide, please. As noted, there are requirements through the municipal class environmental assessment process that includes 2 public meetings. To date, the Transportation Master Plan has held many events to collect stakeholder input on transportation needs and preferred solutions. The following key, and I think we have some summaries here. We've had to date 3 public meetings, in addition to a background summary from the UMTS, the Urban Mobility and Transportation Study, as well as pop-up events, surveys, and direct meetings with stakeholder groups. Some of the themes that have been expressed by the stakeholders included a desire for improved transit frequency and connectivity, more investment to facilitate regional transit connections, better integration between GO and local transit, a desire for more local intercommunity connections for active transportation, a preference for physically separated bike lanes or bicycle facilities, and continuity and consistency of pedestrian and cycling connections. Other input has included the connections to adjacent municipalities, some speed management concerns, general support for an e-scooter program where there is proper education and policy plans in place, general acceptance of the recommendations presented in our last PIC3, which recommended the list of street, transit, active transportation, and other related policies that were considered. Next slide, please. In addition to previously planned improvements, 3 categories of solutions were considered, and they were sort of developed a little differently than previous plans. There was really areas of focus of mobility. Alternative 1, which is a focus of investment on travel within neighborhoods. Alternative 2, which was a focus of investment in travel between neighborhoods. And the third alternative, which was a focus on travel through the town and from the town to adjacent municipalities. The preferred alternative was a combination accommodating varying trip distances so that there was an opportunity for making short trips more convenient and safer, and particularly with sustainable forms of travel, so walking and cycling. To recognize streets as public spaces, and it also includes improving connectivity between neighborhoods and commuting to work destinations that are within town. It offers more of a balance between the needs of local and intercommunity travel. And given the role of the regional road network for travel by all modes, obviously the integrated master plan by the region of Halton is an important component of that component of travel. So we through this we are seeing a balance of solutions that has led to a list of improvements we'll talk about a little bit later. Maybe the next slide. We just want to tie this back to the direction and objectives of council. The recommended strategies build on the strategic plan, including strategic priorities, which have objectives of growth management, community belonging, environmental sustainability, and accountable government. Growth management components include solutions that address growth objectives and are really based on forecasts associated with planned growth within the town. Community belonging incorporates equity explicitly into the plan and supports travel to third places and spaces, which was, as I believe, also an objective of the Parks, Rec, and Library plan. It includes environmental sustainability through a multimodal strategy and recommendations and identification of needs in response to climate change objectives. And in terms of accountability, there is as part of our implementation plan, which we are still in the process of finalizing, there are a series of KPIs, of measures to monitor the progress of this plan. Through the TMP process, these objectives have led to recommendations on infrastructure improvements, policies, more detailed studies and programs. And we'll walk through them briefly now. If maybe we can move to the next slide, please. So we are showing all improvements on streets in Oakville, and that includes the regional road improvements as we understand them from the integrated master plan, and developer responsible works, primarily in North Oakville. Actions that are the responsibility of the town to implement include all of those street improvements that were under previous transportation master plans. So previously identified improvements in Midtown, in the Midtown area, and broader Midtown area. North Oakville improvements on Burnhamthorpe Road and 6th Line, and the west extension of William Halton. Improvements within the industrial areas like along Spears Road, and 2 to 3 lane widenings on North Service Road, South Service Road, and Wycroft. And of course, the grade separations across the Lakeshore West Rail Corridor. There are a few new works. There are really refinements to plans that have previously been identified, including, for example, the modifications within Midtown, the Argus-Davis connection, which is part of that plan, and a number of studies that are proposed. Area studies, which you'll see as sort of the bluish purple areas on this map. That these studies are intended to identify localized safety and active transportation connections at the neighborhood planning level. There are 9 areas that have been identified based on collision data and opportunities for active transportation connections on neighborhood streets. There are also a series of dark purple lines on the map that reflect corridor studies, and these are long corridors that have volumes that are approaching or reaching capacity by the year 2051. And these studies are intended to establish operational improvements such as turn lanes, new traffic control devices, signal timing improvements, optimization, separated active transportation facilities, and they have been identified. You can see on the map that third line, sixth line, eighth line, for example, Rebecca Street are those streets that have been identified. Next slide, please. So this is a lot of words on this slide. The Complete Streets policies, initiatives, seek to ensure that transportation systems are built for all road users, regardless of age or ability. And the previous Oakville Transportation Master Plans have identified the benefits of a complete streets approach, similar to many other jurisdictions. In this study, we've identified specific street topologies that are coordinated with the existing road classification system. So the road classification system has identified local collector and arterial roads to help reflect the volume and the speed and access control that is typically associated with those road types. Complete street topologies sort of overlay that on those road classifications to identify the function of the street relative to the context of the adjacent land use. So these typologies would be used during improvement studies, including planning neighborhood studies, improvement plans, class environmental assessments, and road rehabilitations. The intent is to balance the road configuration between vehicles and transit and cyclists and pedestrians, and other roadway elements, including utilities and streetscape and other amenity areas. The topologies will help guide the design approach to every opportunity the town has to rethink the street system. Next slide, please. So we are proposing the introduction of a new analysis tool, a multimodal level of service guideline, which provides a quantitative methodology to implement complete streets at the project level. So multimodal level of service analysis provides criteria regarding the evaluation of level of service for pedestrians and cyclists and public transit at intersections and along road sections, in addition to what we currently have, in addition to sort of vehicle levels of service. So the thresholds that have been developed through the Transportation Master Plan are based on state of the practice, including the Ontario Traffic Council guidelines, which were released recently. When the town reviews an existing or a new road via an EA or a corridor study or a neighborhood study or simply through reconstruction, it can determine what typology and multimodal level of service targets are appropriate for the road in the future. Then the design team can configure the roadway, including the boulevard area, accordingly. So for example, the pedestrian level of service will be assessed based on the width of the sidewalk, the separation of the sidewalk from the vehicular traffic, frequency of crossing opportunities, and the design team will be able to assess it in terms of sort of a level of service A through F, like a report card, similar to the way traffic is evaluated. But the different street topologies will have different level of service targets. For example, for each mode. So for example, a main street may have a higher recommended pedestrian target than a standard low activity suburban collector road. And that may inform the priorities and allocation of space within that road reconstruction project. Next slide, please. I think I might, yes, thank you. The TMP recommendations include a number of policies to support sustainable modes of travel, operational improvements in safety. The strategies will be context sensitive. Specific recommended actions include updating the engineering standards and official plan policies to align with complete streets policies. And I know there are complete streets policies within the within the OP, but the engineering standards it has been over 20 years since the engineering standards have been updated. Complete neighborhood studies and corridor studies for mobility and active transportation improvements, and consideration of flex streets or townwide flex streets, screening to identify pilot locations. And when we talk about flex streets, the options are school streets, and where in front of elementary schools where the road is closed temporarily for the arrival of students, or so that parents can walk their kids to school, or if their kids are old enough, they can walk to school in a safer environment. It encourages sort of more active lifestyle for the kids. This has been implemented recently in Hamilton and Toronto and Markham. There have been pilots for those municipalities. I do believe that the town has been considering this type of treatment. Slow streets may be another approach to encourage multiple uses of the road right-of-way that is safer for pedestrians. So given this sort of range of opportunities for streets, the street strategy in the near term would include some of the currently planned projects, such as 6-line widening, and some long-standing improvements, such as the Kerr Street grade separation, subject to Metrolinx funding. Some of the longer-term improvements for streets are those that have higher costs or are linked to longer-term improvements. And an example would be the extension of Iroquois Shore, which really is most relevant, most effective when the lands around it, that extension, are being developed, and as the interchange, the Royal Windsor interchange is completed. So that connection there is sort of seen as a longer-term time frame initiative. Next slide, please. There are in the Transportation Master Plan and the recommended Transportation Master Plan a number of transit recommendations, this study has had the benefit of following the 5-year transit strategy, as transit service plan that was completed within the last year. The planned transit improvements are aligned with that initiative, and it includes the frequent transit network service improvements on Dundas and Trafalgar, Trafalgar and Kerr Street, and new routes on 6-line Wheat Bloom Drive, Bronte Road in Niagawa. The master plan also includes initiatives planned by others, including the 407 Transitway, with planned stations at Trafalgar Road, Bronte, and the planned station at Niagawa. In addition, it's recommended that neighborhood service in North Oakville in the longer term be developed as the road network develops. And improvements will also include the eventual increase in the transit route frequency with the expansion of the frequent transit network. And this is consistent with the long-term vision from the 5-year transit service plan. The frequent transit network will eventually include Upper Middle, North Service Road, Wycroft South Service Road, Lakeshore West, Bronte Road, 3rd Line, Dorval, and Niagawa. And actually, next slide, please. And with that expanded frequent transit network in the long term, the recommended long-term service plan is illustrated in this figure. It provides a foundation for additional recommendations and longer-term future transit transit ridership targets. From this figure, we can see that the vast majority of the town is within 800 meters of the frequent transit network routes. Next slide, please. So in addition to the 5-year business plan and the longer-term outlook, the TMP recommendations include collaboration with other agencies and investigation of funding and implementing design guidelines and expand existing programs, including working with other agencies to plan improvements for the expansion of key transit terminals, Oakville GO, Bronte GO, the Uptown Core Terminal, Palermo Terminal, and the future Nayagawa Transit Station to support frequent transit service. Investigate federal funding opportunities based on the transit investments and housing strategy coordination, and continue to collaborate with other transit agencies in Halton, MTO, and Metrolinx to improve fare service integration outside of Oakville. So for the short term, 2026 and 2027 solutions, we anticipate that the improvements to transit service will include the Trafalgar and Dundas operating within 5 to 10 minute frequencies as per the 5-year transit plan, and implementation of the Oakville transit stop guidelines. Next slide, please. The Oakville TMP provides an update to the 2017 Active Transportation Master Plan, or ATMP. It improves, the AT improvements include new infrastructure, all of which are subject to subsequent feasibility studies, policy actions, and programs, establishing standard operating procedures for quick build projects. We anticipate updating the town's standards and operating procedures and winter maintenance service levels for cycling facilities, updating engineering standards to include a toolbox of AT safety treatments at intersections. Overall, the plan identifies 185 AT initiatives to be implemented over the next 25 years, and they include both short-term projects such as bike lanes on North Service Road and Trafalgar, and 6th Line, and Joshua Creek Drive from Bayshore to Upper Middle Road within the next few years. These improvements can be implemented with signage and markings. And then in the medium-term projects, we're seeing bike lanes on Morden Road, which can be implemented with modest reconstruction. Longer-term initiatives such as trails that require approval from other agencies, such as a rail trail adjacent to the Metrolinx corridor, may require additional approval and will require additional time. For the development of this plan, the Active Transportation Assessment applied a layering approach based on guiding principles such as continuity, connectivity to key trip generators, network capacity, network integration, prioritization of safety and user needs, and transportation equity. Each route was assigned a score based on these criteria, and new infrastructure was prioritized based on the total scores. All recommended AT improvements are subject to further feasibility studies just to confirm viability relative to utilities and local constraints. If we are preparing Oakville to participate in the e-scooter pilot, which we'll touch on in a couple of slides, there will be a need for a build-out, a well-connected network of bike lanes, multi-use trails, and off-road trails. Next slide, please. Within the recommendations, there are 81 relate to sidewalk connections, including those identified from the previous active transportation master plan. All sidewalk connections will be assessed as part of the updated sidewalk feasibility study. Near-term actions include priorities where projects have recently been designed, such as Bridge Road from Lees to Sharon Drive, and longer-term priorities will reflect the cost of new connections with higher costs, such as the crossing of Highway 403 to Winston Park. Next slide, please. As part of the active transportation initiatives, we've identified planned routes, development of guidelines, monitoring plans, planning policies, and regulations and partnerships. Example policies include updates to the bicycle parking requirements of new developments, which could be initiated in the near term, and longer-term initiatives, which include guidelines that require some collaboration with other levels of government, such as active transportation treatments at highways. Next slide, please. Goods movement initiatives include the review of the appropriateness of removal of restrictions, such as on Winston Churchill, north of Barrel Road and Cornwall Road, in consultation with the communities, and obviously Halton Region, Peel Region, and the City of Mississauga, as this is a joint jurisdictional road. Consider the removal of restrictions on Rebecca Street from Bronte to Great Lakes. And in the short term, the town should investigate the development of regulations associated with a permissive truck route network, identifying where trucks are allowed on the town roads rather than current restrictive network. And I think the other jurisdictions are moving in this direction, and this does provide a clearer picture of where trucks should be traveling. Next slide, please. Future investigations are recommended, including considerations of time of day restrictions in response to the community issues. So where permissions are allowed, there may still be time of day restrictions to the community to protect the community concerns. Consideration of developing curbside management strategies to coordinate loading and other boulevard elements, and this could include flexible curbsides. And goods movement strategies for employment lands in around the 400 series highways. Next slide, please. Through the TMP, we've investigated new technologies and approaches such as clean energy vehicles, autonomous and connected vehicles, micro-mobility, and mobility as a service, which have the potential to transform mobility choices and systems by the end of this the horizon of this plan. Preparing for these changes could improve efficiency, comfort, and reduce congestion and help achieve the policy objectives of the town. Specific actions have been identified, including establishing policies that encourage car sharing programs for new developments to lessen the need for auto ownership and use, develop bike share pilot program in a high demand area, for example, Sheridan College, forecast EV charging needs and infrastructure strategy, signal optimization, and autonomous and connected vehicle readiness strategy. And ongoing initiatives in the town the town is currently involved in the Ontario Smart Mobility Readiness Forum. A short-term action could also include the planning for the bike share pilot, and long-term priority may be sort of the autonomous transit initiative. Next slide, please. So one specific emerging technology that we've investigated in greater detail is e-scooters. As a bit of a background, the province of Ontario in 2020 initiated a pilot program to allow municipalities to permit e-scooters as defined by the province on municipal streets and paths. Many municipalities have opted into the pilot program, coordinating with suppliers to allow shared e-scooters, including Mississauga and Hamilton and Brampton. Other jurisdictions have not opted into the pilot as a result. E-scooters in those jurisdictions are not legal. Through the Transportation Master Plan, consultation with the public, there was, as previously mentioned, general support for e-scooters use, but there was also a concern about the safety and the need for education and enforcement strategies. E-scooters are seen as part of the long-term mobility strategy to help address the barriers to mobility and cost barriers and mobility for those who are not able to drive, and for movements where transit service might be not available for shorter distances, and for equity and sustainability objectives. The TMP primarily recommends, the TMP preliminary recommendations include a phased approach that includes the development of an education program within the next year, the development of an enforcement strategy in consultation with Halton Region and Halton Police Services that limits the use to those 16 years of age or older within the next year, continue to develop the e-scooter supportive network of bicycle lanes and multi-use paths, and if supported by council, the adoption of a draft bylaw and opt into the provincial program. And the plan is, I believe that as the e-scooters will be included in the TMP staff report anticipated in September, and if endorsed by council, the process of education, enforcement, and network development and opting into the program was anticipated to occur over the next few years, next 3 years or so. Next slide, please. Transportation Demand Management Plan has been developed that supplements the active transportation, transit, and emerging technologies initiatives. The themes of the plan include curbside management, changing travel characteristics, supporting sustainable modes, leveraging the development process, and developing a culture of travel demand or transportation demand management. Next slide, please. There are a number of actions that the TDM strategies reflect, and actions to promote active transportation, public transit, carpooling, telecommuting, with the goal of more efficient use of the transportation system. Short-term initiatives include parking strategies, parking pricing strategies, TDM guidelines and checklists for new development, and medium and longer-term initiatives would include a program to provide major cycling infrastructure, trip infrastructure, including sheltered bike parking. Next slide, please. Early street recommendations. So given these initiatives for streets, active transportation, transit, goods movement, and emerging technologies, we have some sort of key elements for the streets, active transportation, and transit elements of the plan. Early street recommendations include both road projects and neighborhood studies that identify safety and active transportation opportunities. Early initiatives for active transportation include initiating feasibility studies for proposed cycling facilities, consulting on proposed early implementation of active transportation projects, some of the ones that have been listed, but also Lakeshore Road East from Allen to Winston Churchill, which have been proposed as bike lanes, Maple Avenue between Reynolds and Allen, for example. Other key active transportation plans include those road improvements that are currently scheduled that incorporate bicycle lanes or multi-use paths, Bridge Road, North Service Road, and Cornwall Road. The transit improvements in the shorter term, recommendations will include implementation of the 5-year business plan, including routes on Dorval, Third Line, Spears, Cornwall, Upper Middle, and Bronte, with on-demand service in the southeast and north Oakville. Next slide, please. To date, we've developed a long-term transportation strategy to support future growth within the context of the town. The strategy aligns with the council's strategic plan, official plan, and other guiding strategies and plans. It integrates infrastructure improvements, service enhancements, policies, and programs with an initial phasing strategy and recommends solutions across all modes of mobility. Our next steps are to finalize the costing of the infrastructure improvements initially developed for the evaluation of the alternatives. The costs are being assessed together with finance department staff. We will be finalizing a phasing of short-term, medium-term, and long-term capital program implementation plan. We'll be developing an implementation strategy with various departments responsible for delivery as well as KPIs. And we will be going back out to the public. We're scheduled to go back out to the public for our 4th public meeting on May the 27th. With the goal, with the hope of bringing forward these recommendations to council on September 29th of this year. I think this, next slide, please. I think this graphic provides a little summary of where we've been and where we're going from gaining public feedback on the previous UTMS study to identifying needs and opportunities and recommending solutions. And finally, we're in the implementation stage of the plan, and with this feedback, we're hoping that we can go out to the public with the developed implementation plan before returning to council. So with that, Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time, and thank you, council, for your
Well, thank you very much. Most of council have questions or comments for you. I'll lead off by thanking you for a plan that is comprehensive and as ambitious as our residents are and expect of us. And I noticed that it's full of important opportunities in work clothes, and some of those opportunities are in the clothes you wear for future studies. I don't know whether council has second thoughts, new thoughts, or just questions, but I'm pretty sure we've got just about everybody lined up, or at least half of us already lined up. We're going to start with Councillor Elgar, and away we go.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Thank you very much for the presentation. An awful lot of information to unpack here. I guess when I look at it, I look at multimodal level of service. Pedestrian, cyclist, transit, and the last one. Tell me, what is the current numbers now?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, for vehicular levels of service, that is laid out in the master plan. So we do have some screen line analysis that reflects the current and projected volumes of traffic and capacity of the road network. So that's sort of traditionally the way we've looked at the operations of the transportation system. The multimodal level of service analysis tries to replicate that for other modes, for walking and cycling and transit. It hasn't been applied comprehensively through the town for each and every roadway, but the intent is that that be done at the project level. So if a section of eighth line is being reviewed, for example. It would look at the context of the street. It would define the street and the thresholds or the guidelines for that topology of street, a neighborhood street with many accesses and that's not intended to be intensified. That would be defined, and the level of pedestrian activity and the thresholds that we'd be looking for would be incorporated into that. So there is a table in the report that identifies the multimodal level of service thresholds for each of the road topologies, and then that is to be mapped. So each street would be considered for its appropriate topology, and that would set the guidelines and the thresholds. We would be analyzing it at that level, at the project level.
So I guess I think back to, over the years, multimodal split. It's transit or vehicles. And it seems to me that the transit over the years hasn't got a lot better. In the last study, what was transit projected to be and where was the actual? Do you track that at all? Have you looked at that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We certainly can find those numbers. I'm more familiar with 2013 because I did work on the 2013 master plan. There were 3 thresholds at that time. We were looking at 6, 12, and 20% transit mode share. We recognize that the 20%, which was initially identified by the region, was very, very ambitious. And so as I recall the 2018 numbers, and I'm not sure if anyone here has that number, there was a recognition that that number would need to come down. I'm not certain if that last master plan was in the 12% range.
Well, and actually the only reason I raise is, I think we were so convinced that all of a sudden everybody's going to jump in the bus, and that hasn't happened. No. And the cost for operating the bus hasn't gone down either. You know what I mean? Like it's so expensive. But then you really hit a point when you said about walk to school. Now, if you want to talk about how things have gone on that area, I can drive you around many schools in the morning and at night, and you'll find that children that used to walk 15 years ago and 10 years ago, they're driven to school now. I'll be interested to see how that's going to change based on what I'm seeing, especially in my ward, and not just in my ward, but it is ridiculous now. Yeah. Kids are not walking.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that is certainly for neighborhoods, that is a great opportunity to lessen the use of vehicles, is to encourage parents to walk with their kids or have their kids walk with their friends. The City of Hamilton has just released the results of their pilot for school streets, and there's a fair bit in there about what the opportunities are, and really schools are somewhat of a captive audience. It may be an opportunity really to drive the message home.
I think we got a lot of work to do in that area. Yeah. I noticed on slide 16, I found that interesting. It looked to me like you were talking about regional transit. You don't have to give it, but it showed where the arrows like Oakville going to Milton or Oakville going to Burlington. Are you thinking of regional transit going forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was not part of our assessment. We were really focusing on the operations and the opportunities, sort of agnostic from sort of jurisdictional responsibility. We had anticipated sort of the plans of Oakville Transit, which had been sort of discussed with council and presented to council within the last number of months.
That's probably a good idea based on what I read in the paper, what's going on in Peel and Mississauga right now, where they're going to save $40 million immediately. The last one, finalize the cost of the infrastructure. You're going to be able to come up by September of 2025. You're going to be able to give us the full costing and what the taxpayers are going to have to bite?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have been working on the costing. We are close, I would say. We intend to have those numbers, and certainly the costing per project completed before we go back to the public. The details are still being revised with the finance department. It is important to get it correct before we go public with these numbers, especially with the development charges sort of following this exercise. So we're working through that with them, and the split between benefit to existing and the development charge is another step, and the timing of that I think we're still sorting out. But the intent is to have all of the costing done within the next couple of months, and certainly by the time we are presenting to council.
So when you say, okay, that's costing, but then you said about the other little split there where the existing versus the additional for the new development. Will you have that by September 2025 also?
Well, that is something I think that's still in, through you, Mr. Mayor, that is something that's still, the timing of that is being developed, and I don't know if I may want to pass it through to staff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the total costing of the TMP will be completed by September. What would be indicated in there will be what is attributed to growth, what will be not attributed to growth, because certain things are not attributed to growth, and we're working closely with the finance department on that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Okay, I've taken enough of your time, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's okay, Councillor. We have all the time in the world. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you to the delegation, thank you very much for all the work and staff, of course, in regards to preparing this whole report. Couple of questions or requests, rather. The maps, the one on figure 3.6 on page 32. When I tried to drill down to see where the sidewalks were going to be put in some of the neighborhoods, I couldn't see the faint blue line as to where they were actually situated. So if somebody could get a larger map for those that are sort of so encompassing in terms of different phases, that would be appreciated. The other thing was on page 80 or 58 rather, the Kerr Street separation, our favorite topic in regards to Metrolinx not coming to the table the way they had originally intended to or had agreed to. I was very interested when I saw the notation that the rail corridor for Fourth Line and Kerr Street are currently approaching and are projected to exceed the Transportation Canada threshold. Now, does that mean that they put pressure on the provincial government to make those improvements, or is there an opportunity whereby the federal government could provide some funding given that threshold has been met?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those thresholds, I would say, are really an indicator of need. It is not, I would say, it has not, unfortunately, been a commitment, an indicator of responsibility or commitment of jurisdictions. So there are many, I think, facilities that are reaching those thresholds in many jurisdictions, but unfortunately, has not led to improvements. But it is important for this information to be used and shared with Metrolinx to highlight the relevance and maybe even the priority of these projects.
Okay, fair point. The other thing, and I'm very pleased to see it captured in this report, is the e-scooters. I'm very, very concerned. The more I see people, usually kids, either two on a scooter, not wearing a helmet, going at excessive speeds, more than what I think they should be doing, and not being safe with them. You referenced in the report the provincial e-scooter pilot program. Is there a possibility I could get a copy of that, or if you could provide the link to it for us so we could see what is being proposed for that? And then it gives us sort of preparation time before we try to even assess something on a local level.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can provide a link to that information, and I believe in our appendix associated with this topic, there's a much more fulsome description.
Okay.
So that certainly will be there by the next time we come back to council.
Super. Thank you very much for that. And going back to what I raised with the indication of sidewalks for active transportation within existing neighborhoods tend to be more, I think, in some of these southern areas where there are older communities that have not kept pace and have not had sidewalks introduced. Councillor Chisholm and I encountered quite a lot of pushback when we were dealing with the drainage issue and servicing in a particular area that we represent. And it came to light that it was on the previous master plan that those sidewalks were going to be introduced. I don't think the average person realizes. And so when you reference neighborhood studies, will there be a fulsome communication plan to the residents in regards to what's being looked at in their neighborhood, i.e. sidewalks? And is it on both sides of the road, or is it on one side of the road? You know, those sort of things. Because as I say, people were absolutely dumbfounded when they found out they were slated for sidewalks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the intent, and I do believe in the presentation, we do talk specifically about for any sidewalk that's identified or proposed, that there will be a technical review to ensure that that there is feasibility, that the implications would be recognized, like constraints of trees and utilities and the rest of it.
Exactly.
So that will be undertaken. For the neighborhood studies, that is anticipated to be a public process. So there would be public meetings and or at least a public meeting to identify the recommendations and gain feedback from the public before it is finalized.
Okay. And that, again, I think you referenced in your presentation, would be based on priority, i.e. the necessity to introduce that in a particular area due to traffic issues that they're in sort of dealing with at the present time. Is that correct?
That, through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct.
Okay, good stuff. There was also,
Councillor Dudek, if I may. Sorry, Mayor, but can I just jump in just quickly just
Sure.
to talk about the sidewalk just a little bit more? Sorry, Councillor Dudek.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Ms. Mayor. So the sidewalk plan for the transportation master plan is meant to be an overall guidebook, I'll call it. It's not automatically that every sidewalk is draw a line, whether it's on one side or two side, or automatically going in. We're certainly very conscious of it's very difficult to assess sidewalk at this level, the master plan level. As Pere said, when we do any implementation of any sidewalks, there will be public consultation with the neighborhood. We will assess not only the utilities and the trees, but we're also going to really consult with the public, particularly in the older neighborhoods in terms of where the sidewalk potentially will be implemented. So it doesn't automatically, because it's on the map, it will be we're just gonna go in and start putting in the sidewalk. So we're very conscious of those that implement. It's from the implementation perspective, we will ensure that the neighborhood is consulted.
Thank you. That helps considerably. The other question I had is in regards to optimizing the signal system. And I guess my question is, what happens when it has reached the point that can't be done? Case in point, I know I've had several inquiries from people on Trafalgar Road, whether it's the GO station or up on Leyland, wanting to have an advanced light. And regional staff were very good about sort of modifying it to get the best results. But from what I understood, and I forget who I heard it from, was that there is nothing more they can do to optimize that signal. And if that's the case, we certainly have Midtown and others coming into play. And my concern is, what happens when you can't do anything more to deal with the situation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the town and the region have both capacity-related improvements, so physical improvements and signal timing improvements that are available to them, as well as other methods to encourage alternative modes of travel. So within Midtown, for example, there are a number, and I'm sure we'll be back to discuss that topic, but there are a number of capacity-related improvements that will be implemented or planned to go along with the growing traffic associated with it. You are absolutely correct in that there are sort of limits to what signal timing improvements can do. Certainly the cycle lengths can be lengthened to make more efficient use of the available time. The phasing of signal timing can be changed to be more efficient to the traffic flows that are coming through. There may be opportunities for detection for areas where there's considerable variation in traffic flows, so the traffic signals can be responsive to the changing demand. Those are the elements. They're more, especially with the corridor studies, where we are not anticipating to widen sixth line or eighth line, but these may be opportunities to make things to reduce delays and reduce queues. So that is, it's just one sort of tool within the sort of transportation toolbox.
Fair point. Thank you very much. And last comment before I turn the floor to others. Councillor Elgar raised the point of the walk to school component. And I think, unfortunately, until our colleagues at the Board of Education change the busing issue that takes place at so many of the schools now due to trying to modify boundaries, we're really sort of at a deficit compared to when many of us were growing up and we did walk to school. So I just throw that one in for good measure. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate all the effort.
Thank you, Councillor. Were you referring just now to the way the board's preference for larger schools has led to larger areas covered, so that the boundaries are no
Correct.
longer as small as they used to be? Right.
Correct.
Thank you for helping with that. Councillor Lischina?
Thank you, Your Worship. Ray, thank you for that presentation. I wanted to step back a bit. As the beginning of your presentation, and obviously in this report, this is talking about this is a long-term vision going into 2051, and obviously a lot of detail following that. But stepping back, how confident are you in these prediction models? Because you mentioned a whole bunch of data inputs in slide 5 about future capacity, volume, numbers. We're having traffic issues now, and we've done transportation master plans before. And so considering how the town is going to be growing, I'm just not seeing how, like, when I say confident, it's a tough answer or tough to answer that. But the next 20, 25 years, I'm very skeptical of what I'm reading here. And can you make me feel better?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I hope so. So I guess the towns, there the town's portion of the plan is only a portion of the plan because the town is responsible for town roads and active transportation opportunities and transit. And this is a strategy that leverages those, that opportunity. That the region is implementing the integrated master plan. It is responsible for the regional road system, which carries the bulk of the travel through the town and longer distances within the town. There are a number of road improvements associated with the integrated master plan, and that will help accommodate a lot of the growth that's expected. Another element is, which we really haven't talked about that much, is the provincial highway system, the QEW 403, which is constrained, and there are plans for improvements at least through the eastern half of the QEW and the 403 north-south. All of those elements will be part of the strategy to accommodate growth from the street network, what we see in terms of delays and frustration and the rest of it. So there are opportunities as the region is fulfilling their responsibilities. There is the opportunity for continued lobbying with the province to get some of the higher order, higher capacity improvements in place. And then with the town, I think the effort is to make that change that Councillor Elgar was referring to earlier, that it is going to be very difficult to get people to change their behavior and to increase the transit shift. But part of that is how the land use is going to develop in the future. North Oakville is going to, is a little more dense than the center part of livable Oakville. But Midtown and some of the other nodes are going to be much more dense. So that it is our intent to provide the walking and cycling and transit infrastructure to make that shift occur. I don't know if that.
Councillor Lischina, before the CAO adds, the answer put me in mind of South Park's famous explanation for everything, which was blame Canada.
Mayor Britton, through to you, Councillor Lischina, I was actually sorry, not going to provide you any other level of comfort at all, because the question you asked is a great question. I think on one side of it, though, we can't expand the roads anymore to accommodate it without drastically impacting the character of our communities. So that's an impediment that you don't really want to go down, which means it forces us over to the side of trying to accommodate those other modes as best as possible. And this strategy will help us do that piece of it. The region's integrated master plan will help us do another piece. But a big part of it is the funding on the transit system, because we can't continue to support the transit system to the level that would provide for those shifts more effectively on the tax base. So that permanent transit funding piece, the initiatives on Metrolinks and those other pieces are the things that would give you more satisfaction that we may be able to reach it. So it's a great question, but it's a big group of agencies and funding that have to really solve it.
Alrighty, comforted or not, we turn, if you're satisfied for now, we'll turn to Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Very good report. I do have reservations too in our future, what's going to happen. And I've expressed this many times, is that at the end of the day, we're building roads and doing this and doing that, and we fill them up very quickly with cars and vehicles and so forth. So at the end of the day, land values are so high, and we don't have a lot of land to put new roadways in and so forth. Then we're talking about putting roadways to accommodate all users, whether it be walking, bicycles, and buses and everything else. So I find just mind-blowing to try to accommodate that on our road system. But again, and I guess the bigger question has to be asked, and I've asked this question before, I've never got an answer. Has the major car manufacturers of the world, have they decreased their cars coming in on imports and so forth? Because the way I see it now with fossil fuels and the carbon issues and so forth, fossil fueled cars are starting to go down. Mind you, a lot of the electric have hold off on building more. But at the end of the day, we're just replacing with electric vehicles on the roadway. So I'm not sure with our system of transportation if we are decreasing vehicles on the road. I'm not convinced of that at this point in time. The other thing too, I wanted to go back to slide, I think it was slide 24 with respect to the scooters and everything else. And I just want to have some clarification on this one. Yeah, I had it there once before, 24, got 21, there we go. These scooters, I understand that, but where I'm having difficulty is there's more to these scooters than just scooters now. We're finding that there are little mini bikes running up and down, which have basically more lawnmower engines in them, and they're scooting around at 30, 40 kilometers an hour. Is there any discussion with the Minister of Transportation Communication with respect to scooters and governing these pieces of apparatus to a certain speed? Because I was shocked to see one of these things tailing a car at 35 kilometers an hour, and it was just a scooter. So has there been any discussion at that level through our Master Transportation to look at governing these things so they maintain a speed? I understand the age and so forth and all that stuff we need to look at, but the enforcement side, and have we run our transportation study with our regional police and what they think of our plans for the future? Does it meet the enforcement control? Those type of questions. We're at the municipal level doing all these things, and unfortunately, sometimes at the provincial and federal level, what we need to have happen doesn't happen. So I guess I have mixed feelings about this whole trying to build for all. And Oakville is different. And I keep saying to people, as long as they have high incomes, they're still going to buy their vehicles and they're still going to drive. And with respect to the school situation, you're absolutely right. Through school accommodation, we got rid of schools and built bigger ones. And the reality of it is, there's always been a fear factor. And now kids walking to school by themselves are afraid of being abducted and so forth. That always seemed to be a message. And parents are very, very concerned about that type. So they don't let their kids walk to school anymore. Unfortunately, that's the way society has moved in that direction. I have real concerns about that. And the other thing too, parents, they're getting in the car to go to work. They're putting their kids in the car, dropping the kids off at school, going right to work. So there's a convenience for them. So those are the kind of, I guess, my comments on it. The other thing I want to talk about too is we talked about green infrastructure and so forth. Let's look at these, especially I'm going to use my ward. Let's look at these sidewalks as here we are now putting concrete down, and now this water, where was this water going to go? It's going to start draining into major areas and flooding and so forth. And the backlash has been, we've lived here, for 40, 50 years. We don't need sidewalks. And I'm glad that I heard that, there will be community input with respect about sidewalks if they are in the plan, but not necessarily they're going to be done. They cost taxpayers a lot of money. And I still see where we have sidewalks, people still walk on the road. For some reason, they just won't walk on the sidewalk. So at the end of the day, I just want to be looking at this more of a common sense with these areas, especially the e-scooters, and if we have any communication with the ministry on this and how that's going to work and how we're going to accommodate it in the future. And I'll just leave those as comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Grant.
That's going to be a hard act to follow. I want to say I really appreciate the lofty ideals brought up in the whole plan. The one question I do have, or concern is, did I miss the appendices? They were not part of this, were they? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, through Mr. Mayor. The appendix is still being finalized, so we just provide you the high-level report. There's almost like 500 pages of Appendix C that we're still just trying to finish off. So no, you do not have them.
All right. Is
Sorry
this
about
allowed
that.
motoring through it and then getting to, oh, we'll check Appendix M. I'm like, great, it's not there. So, all right, if we can get that at some point sooner.
So the appendices will be part of the overall September report. We're
Okay.
going out to the public with the general recommendations that you see today, and the appendix will be completed following that.
Okay.
So we'll be finishing that throughout the summer.
It's on me for not bothering about it last week, so I get that. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And some of the stuff we've covered. From your lips to God's ears about 2041 being the Trafalgar BLT or BRT, what do you know that we don't? Because since 2005, Metrolinx has been promising that BRT. Or a BLT, that'd be nice too.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we are continuing to work with Halton Region on the improvements and the timing. So just for clarification, we're referring to Trafalgar as opposed to Dundas?
We're referring to Trafalgar.
Trafalgar. So yes, it will be a coordinated effort. We are sort of working with the projected and anticipated timing of higher order transit, but as part of the five-year transit strategy in the frequent transit network, the first step will be more frequent buses on Trafalgar, and then following that, there is a timing strategy that still will need to be developed between the town and the region. I don't know whether town staff have any.
Sorry, I just want to provide some clarity. Sorry, Councillor Grant. Are you referring to the 2041 for the Trafalgar BRT implementation, or are you referring to?
You've got listed at 242 Metrolinx, and it mentions that by 2041, one of the things we'll be seeing would be the Trafalgar BRT.
Oh, I see. So I think for clarity, I just want to make sure I'm speaking correctly. I'm looking at Ray. But the integrated master plan for the Halton region is looking at the BRT. And on Trafalgar, we're already widened, and the matter of creating the BRT is currently recommended in the integrated master plan, I believe also for 2041. And they just published their public information meeting, so I'm just have to double check that. So it's less about Metrolinx for the Trafalgar BRT though. The Dundas BRT, however, is being currently studied by Metrolinx for the business case to move forward. The Trafalgar BRT is just a matter of working with the region to have the commitment to funding to put the equipment on, which was always meant to be curb lane. And that extra lane that was only widened a couple of years ago when I got here is something that we're working with them to move forward into the BRT format.
Okay. Well, then that's basically my concern with places like Dundas and Trafalgar, is that we've expanded them.
Correct.
We've got the extra roadway now. And a lot of new drivers are really appreciating having that extra area to move out into. So essentially, we've now got packed roads with an extra lane, and we're going to try and introduce a bus rapid transit into what is going to be, by that time, an already crowded area.
We definitely hear you there. I think working with the region in the way that they see their integrated master plan is that they will provide the service to the town. And in the most recent, I believe, presentation to regional council, it's like they're the one who would help work with the local municipalities on programming. And when we call that programming is that when the road is actually widened, you know, how soon and how quickly can we put that transit infrastructure into that lane. Totally understand that, unfortunately, we didn't put that infrastructure in on day one before the car all got used to it. But intent is that the sequence, the region's integrated master plan is looking at widen the lanes, have HOV, and then BRT as almost their two-step process. So we definitely see that there's opportunity to work with the region to accelerate the need for the programming on these roads before we just let the car back in.
Right. Again, it's wonderful to have all these lofty ideals, but if we don't have anything solid to back that up, we're just going to have angry drivers in less spaces again.
That's right.
It's all right. Okay, we'll move on from that. Kids, Yeah, as far as dropping kids off at school in cars, that's happening even if they live a few doors away. We have a couple of schools, in fact, one where the entire dedicated bike lane is taken over by cars parked by parents dropping their kids off when they get back. It's ridiculous. You know, and I don't know, I don't know where Councillor Chisholm's finding abduction details, but it's not that. It's just that people are getting lazier, you know, or they don't want, you know, their 3-year-old to like run up the street behind them to get to school. It's difficult. Parents also are working. It's easier for them to drop off the kids as they're going to work. So it'd be wonderful if we could do a flex road to have it open and have all the butterflies and children run into the streets and be safe, but I don't think that that's going to be something you can really get away with. Just on that point. And then, not to take up too much time, I am one of the e-scooter users. I'm a responsible one, I'd like to think. I've never seen one go 35 kilometers per hour, except one time when my brakes were not working. I was going down Trafalgar. And I don't often share. I often, you know, I'm always saying, Jeff, get your own e-scooter. So I never have two of us going at the same time, but there are some things in here, the phrasing of this one, that the town will town will need to implement e-scooters in areas where their benefits are maximized and risks are minimized. That really doesn't mean a lot to me. It's because, I mean, Trafalgar is possibly one of the best roadways right now to go up and down. You know, best of both worlds, great. You know, you've got your dedicated lanes. But if we're talking about neighborhoods where, let's say, you know, the bus is 500 feet that way, I'm going to go up through my whole community to get there. It could still be a dangerous area. So how do we balance that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that is part of the strategy is implementing some of the missing links in the active transportation network over the next 3 years as this strategy is being developed of education and enforcement strategy. I think I did hear that earlier about working with Halton Police and Halton Region as well in terms of regional roads and what's permitted on regional roads. So it is a sort of a bit of a combined package that is being recommended for the implementation, supportive of the implementation, subject to council approval, but it is a number of things that we feel are necessary to move forward with.
Okay, but in the concept of, say, moving within a neighborhood, that's fine. But neighborhood to neighborhood, would there then be a dedicated lane between those neighborhoods? And then between areas of town, obviously you would, but.
Sorry, if I may. E-scooter program is actually a fairly complex thing, and I could completely understand that, you know, which way do we start? So the master plan generally look at the overall network for availability of spaces where e-scooter could travel, and typically we don't want them on sidewalks, we don't want them on roads, we want them on multi-use path. But we don't have multi-use path that's all connected all across town. So it's going to take us some time, not even, we can't finish every multi-use path across town for every single road, for every single location in the next 3 years. So what we're looking at is when e-scooter is meant to look at last mile, first mile type of thing. So then we really complement that with transit. If we sign up for one of those e-scooter programs with the folks that you could sign up for e-scooter, pay a couple cents, and then you start drive it. You do that in the neighborhoods where the facilities are there. So the first thing we're going to do, look at the gap of the facilities, look at where we could implement them, and then we start looking at pockets. We look at those last mile, first mile locations to potentially work with a third party provider. And then we really work with transit to make sure there's transit where they park and where the destination starts. So they can hop on the transit and go somewhere far. So it really isn't intended for you to go take e-scooter all the way up and down the entire Trafalgar to take your the entire commute. So there's just baby steps in terms of integrating or introducing e-scooter into our community. And I know we didn't lay all of that detail out. That's part of the implementation plan. But essentially, we have to look at the accessibility of the network. Then we look at what are we using it for. And that's what the statement that you're a bit confused about that you said is only certain areas that we're going to implement. We're not going to implement them across town overnight. Okay. And we're certainly going to learn about what our other neighboring municipalities are learning about when they're only implementing certain areas and what they're learning about BIAs or certain popular area destinations. So there's a lot to e-scooters, and I could go on and on. But I think there's, what we're trying to do is doing a very pragmatic approach in going into e-scooter. We're not just jumping in this year. We want to take, as you saw in the report, almost a 3-year time frame to really take a look at it and carefully consider all the requirements, complemented by enforcement, and push it out to the public in a, I'll say, a responsible way. I hope that sort of answer.
It does in a sense.
Thank you.
And to cap onto that, then, essentially, you'll find that a lot of from what I found talking to the people at Sheridan, a lot of these scooter riders are responsible people who do not travel 40 kilometers an hour on the road. But they also realize that even with a helmet, we're taking our lives in our own hands if we go on the street because, again, of the fact that everybody's rushing on the roads. So finding, an education program is important, but being able to say that, to a certain age range, this is a safe thing. It's a difficult way of getting there. We need to be able to have people use their own common sense in a world where not many people are using their common sense driving around. So anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Commissioner, your remark might make a good footnote if it's not too late to put in the document that goes out to the public. And with that, we turn to Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. Thank you very much for bearing with this barrage of questions, and I'm not going to let you down. There's more coming. I want to start with data, and Councillor Chenna went where I wanted to go, which is confidence in the data. And I've heard now that there's an appendix that will have, I think, some of this data. I'd respectfully ask that we could see it sooner than September. The Midtown, as an example, from a capacity and volume, understanding that more would help build some confidence in potential options because Cornwall and Trafalgar signal optimization that's it. Do anything more at Cornwall and Trafalgar and we're going to have problems at Cross, and that's just a given. And so the data would help us reflect more on these options that are in front of us. And in particular, though, I'd also like to understand the data going into downtown. What's the volume going in and out of downtown? Again, that helps us as a business district. I'm sure other business districts would like to know volumes on their major arterials. Parking has not been talked about a lot, but there is a reference in the report about the technology being used to measure parking downtown. And I'd ask and suggest you look more closely at the reliability of that data. We have had days where you could, and Councillor Giddings has actually watched me, circle the block 4 times. And yet that day, it seems to predict that we had very low parking. We had lots of parking capacity. It's like, no, we don't. And when we make decisions, we need to have confidence the data is correct. And downtown in particular has this challenge around, we love the volume of people coming to visit and play and shop downtown, but we have a capacity constraint. And so understanding the reliability of that data would be helpful to us. My last comment on that relates to downtown is on wayfinding. So whoever takes on the wayfinding project, we need to do better than the signage that was put in place, I think 4 years ago. It's too small. It doesn't reflect the character of the neighborhood in terms of it's there, how it's located, but more importantly, it's very hard to read while you're coming in and out of the corridor. And so, all for wayfinding, but let's make sure it's an improvement. On e-scooters, the only thing I want to add to the conversation is, I think Councillor Chisholm mentioned enforcement, and my understanding is ME cannot do any enforcement on an e-scooter, so understanding that more would be great. And I think when we get to discussions about e-scooters, I'd like to understand liability and how that relates to risk for the town. I won't comment that certain people are seen riding an e-scooter without a helmet on, but that happens with bikes as well. I want to touch on, you said some of the report is exceptional in terms of identifying some of the challenges, connectivity, frequency being primary. And the commissioner did help me understand that last mile connection, how e-scooters could work. I'm not clear on some of the strategies that are really going to change behavior. That doesn't seem to come across in the report the way I think we need to understand. I think we're counting on behavior change, and while education, we always hope will do that, are there any other strategies that are going to be deployed to make the shift to either ride transit or walk or cycle more? Can you tell me a little bit about how you envision these neighborhood studies? Because I'm pleased to hear through the questions of Councillor Duddock that you are going to have neighborhood engagement, and there's going to be not just a technical review, but there's really going to be engagement. But what is encompassed in a neighborhood study?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the neighborhood study is intended to be basically a mini version of the town-wide initiative, but with a focus on safety and connectivity of active transportation routes and some connections to transit, connectivity to transit. So as was mentioned, the connectivity is not clear. We have routes that sort of are built and they sort of stop, and there may be streets that can serve as a connection, but not in its current form. So maybe the streets need to be slower. Maybe there needs to be some other form of traffic control to calm the speeds of traffic down to a point where they can interact with pedestrians and cyclists safer. So it's finding those links, particularly to destinations like schools and parks and stores, that allow parents to feel comfortable letting their kids, travel along a particular route, or that they themselves want to travel within the neighborhood. And that was part of our series of strategies within the neighborhood, between neighborhoods. Within the neighborhood, travel more safely. So that is the goal. It will be fed by information on traffic speeds and collisions, which we have incorporated into identifying which neighborhoods would benefit the most, and connections between those sort of endpoints of the pedestrian ways, the multi-use paths, and the cycling links, on-road cycling links.
So thank you for that, Commissioner. What would you like to add?
If I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, to context it with our current program, we have traffic calming programs, we have our neighborhood traffic safety programs, we have traffic signal programs, we have AT programs. So what the Transportation Master Plan is doing, and this neighborhood study would do, is that we basically package all the good work that staff did together, and we look at the neighborhood holistically.
Thank you.
When we look at the neighborhood holistically, we're going to look at where are they going, between the mall and the school, how do we safely get them there? We always consider every type of mode So then you name it from micromobility, or e-scooter, to AT, to transit, to cars. So we essentially want to look at that general neighborhood, and you see it's a pretty big neighborhood, that we want to allow folks, as Ray puts it, to travel the way they want to travel. And we're not looking at singular programs, even when we do the singular program with our good staff, they do consider all of this. But we really feel that it's like a mini TMP of that neighborhood. Really work with the counselors and the neighborhood to create the path, the routes, the different modes. And then we recommend infrastructure improvements. So it could be pedestrian crossing. It could be traffic calming. It could be a link that we forgot about in between, a catwalk and a park. So those are the type of things that we would then recommend infrastructure improvements to make this neighborhood easy to travel and with all the options to travel. I hope that helps with, and we'll do full consultation earlier per Councilor Duddick's per point on that.
And so thank you for that explanation. Both together complement help. Will speed surveys be part of that process?
Yes, data will be part of that process. So whether it's speed, collision, I think Ray mentioned, traffic data, volume data, counts, they're all going to be part of that process.
Okay, I look forward to that process being brought to more clarity for the public. And I would suggest that if this is the report that the public is going to get, that greater clarity around what is the purpose and intent of a neighborhood study and the objectives of it, perhaps would help people understand a little more. I'm conscious of time. I want to just talk about truck permissions. So I understand that you want to have permissive, not restrictive, and I do want to be crystal clear. While Winston Churchill is a shared road, it currently has restrictions on it. And those restrictions are incredibly, fundamentally, expert reports relied on it having truck restrictions on it. And we are already experiencing a high level of trucks coming out of the industrial area of Mississauga, trying to come up Winston Churchill. Are you suggesting in this report that we would be okay with a more permissive approach on Winston Churchill?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the recommendations here were intended to identify where there is connectivity gaps. In the recommendations, I believe there is an intent to consult with the community, and we have heard already some concerns with the specific location, but the neighboring jurisdiction to have an understanding of what their plans are for this road, and what form of truck accommodation can be made, and if it is nighttime restrictions or daytime permissions, or whether the restrictions that are currently in place should be transferred over into the permissive strategy. But from a network continuity standpoint, this does represent a gap in the connectivity of the truck routes.
So Avon Head was built specifically to try and address that. So I'm really clear, Commissioner CAO, any decision on Winston Churchill needs to be a very comprehensive public consultation. We have made promises to that community based on expert reports. That this is one that's a real hot button.
Definitely, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want clarity. If you go to page 99 of your report, there's the truck permissive route. I just want to explain a little bit about the permissive route. The permissive route is the dark red lines that we're saying that truck is permitted to go on those routes. The report further indicate that the previous restrictions are to remain. So if you look at Winston Churchill, we do have the time restriction that are staying there. So I think what perhaps we want to make it clear that when we do present to the public, it's a combination of permissive and restriction. We're not removing the restriction just because we're calling it permissive. We're just identifying the permissive routes that we would prefer the truck to go on while keeping the restrictions on the routes that's already there. So we're actually not making that what I can see. Winston Churchill permissive route, the restriction, which is that the green dash line stays, which is based on your previous studies, and we're respecting that.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. I think there's some language in here that might mislead.
Definitely, I hear you there. So we'll make sure that we clarify the permissive route map with indications and the legends to make it a little bit more clear.
So I'm conscious I've taken more than my fair share of time. Two last comments. One is, I'm not clear on what you mean by incentives for EV, given that plants are closing because they're not selling enough EVs. So at some point, if not tonight, if somebody could clarify that. I do know that there are manufacturers who'd love to sponsor EV charging stations, but our signage bylaw wouldn't allow us to put a simple little logo to allow them to give us a high-speed charger, so we might want to consider that. And my last comment is, it's not clear to me how we're choosing what comes first, second, and third in terms of each of the investments we're going to make. And I would expect that we'd see that in September, because I struggle with that even for Midtown. And in our view, while we've heard some people say Royal Windsor interchange should be, one of the last things, our view is you want to get traffic off Trafalgar from coming south-north, the Royal Windsor interchange is pretty important. So it's not clear in this how you're making or recommending those decisions be made. And if that could be made clearer, I would appreciate it. And with that, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm gonna just have a couple questions about some specifics. On slide 18, on the active transportation map that you've got out here, and thanks for forwarding that on. It seems to me when we talked about the Bronte Mass Transit Station, we had highlighted the need to connect the residential area south of Spears Road into that corridor. We're going to have shops and restaurants and a number of things up there. And we continue to force people to get in their cars and drive along Bridge Road to go up Bronte or Third Line and then back along Spears in order to access the GO station. So and maybe this comes in the land strategy a little later, but can we please have some sort of acknowledgement there that we need to have some kind of pedestrian connection from the community south? And I dare not speak for my Ward 2 colleagues, but getting from the residents up to Spears Road where it's a transit corridor is so important. So I mean, we need to start figuring out how we can purchase properties or create pedestrian catwalks that are going to get people in a more direct line up to those communities. I looked to see where we talked about that when we were doing the Bronte Mass Transit Station, but I couldn't find it. So is that something we can please ensure that we have outlined and we have planned and we are actively pursuing so that people can access those transit stations without having to get in their car to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can certainly take another look at that for opportunities, and I think much of this process has been, as it really is, it's need driven in terms of connectivity, but it has also been opportunity driven. And much of that area, if I'm understanding it correctly, east of Bronte, between Spears and Bridge, for example, am I understanding that need, that connection? Is that the correct request? Yeah. There wasn't really a gap seen, but if we can certainly go back and take a look at that and assess opportunities.
Yeah, we're going to have over 20,000 people and jobs right on the other side of that corridor. So at some point, we're going to need to figure out how we purchase a property and make a catwalk. And waiting till we need it usually means waiting till it's long past we needed it. So the sooner we get ahead of it, at least I like seeing pictures and drawings so we know we've thought of it, and then people understand that yes, they've thought about that. That helps. And just on that map as well, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we've marked Reynolds Street as what is actually Trafalgar Road. I'm if I zoom in really close on that map, just so we're correct on that. But the reason I was asking about that, because the little green line that goes up across the avenue, I think to Lions Lane, there is an underpass foot connection that goes over to 6th Line, and I don't think I see it. So I'm just want to make sure we're going to maintain that when Midtown gets developed, or is that going away?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is not intended to be removed. That connection does exist. We do recognize that. I'm not sure why it's not illustrated there on that map. I see it that it seems to.
Yeah, and that's fine. If it's just we didn't finish the drawing line, that's fine. I just, as long as there weren't plans to eliminate that, or during Midtown that wasn't going to be in the foreseeable future, then I thought we should address that now rather than wait till later. So just two sort of larger issues that I'm having here with the plan in general, and I'm not sure that we are framing the problem appropriately here, and I don't think we've actually even addressed the problem of what it is we're trying to achieve here. There is no doubt that we are growing as a community. We are mandated to grow. We have more population coming here. And the question that I think we as a council and the province as well fails to recognize is that we cannot continue to accommodate people the way we have. We cannot. I know our CAO said we wouldn't like it if we had to expand roads. I would say we cannot do that. We cannot expropriate thousands of homes to continue expanding road networks. So as we go out to the public, I think our language continues to be very permissive, and it continues to be very soft. And I think on page 55 of the report, it said the study recognizes, however, that road widenings may not always be the most suitable option to address these capacity needs. And I think that's the kind of language that lets us down. And it's the kind of language that doesn't frame the problem to the public. It's the kind of language that lets them still think, as we grow here, we can all be in single vehicle transportation mode, in single occupancy vehicles, and getting along. And we all are still going to do that. And I know Councillor Elgar was talking about our modal splits, and we just haven't seen that. And we continue to plug along with this carrot, carrot, carrot. And at some point, we're going to have no other option but to use a stick because the province isn't doing it. So we're going to be left with such bad congestion because I don't think we're framing the problem in the correct light here. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't even read the term induced demand anywhere in this report. And we have had numerous studies for over a decade that have said what building more roads does in terms of traffic. And I'm wondering why we are shying away from an honest conversation with the residents about what we must do to accommodate the growth that we are mandated to take. And I'm wondering when we go out to public, how we start having those real conversations with people, because their expectation is as growth comes, we should all continue to have 1.8 vehicles per home and we should not be in traffic anymore. And I'm wondering how we frame that discussion as we go forward in the public consultation out here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do believe we've certainly attempted to have that discussion. The first public meeting was actually prior to the Transportation Master Plan being initiated or really gotten going, and that was through the Urban Mobility and Transportation Strategy. So we held a public meeting to discuss those very points that were documented in that background report. We move forward through this exercise with the understanding, with that general understanding. And as per the recommendations that are in the plan, other than what has been presented in the 2018 master plan, and some modifications to the transportation improvements or road improvements in Midtown, there are no additional road widenings or additional new roads proposed in the plan. So while we don't discuss it so much in this report, that discussion and understanding was shared in previous and background reports. I hate to refer to appendices that you haven't seen, but there is that summary of policy documents as part of this overall exercise.
No, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to expect our residents to go and read appendices and policy documents and background stuff. I just, maybe moving forward as we go out to the public, I think we have to be very clear and upfront about the limitations on what all of our abilities are across the GTHA in particular. So I'll leave that to you. I wanted to raise the point though, because I think we need to be more direct about it. And I think, you know, we kind of lead people on to thinking that this is all going to maintain, it's okay, and we'll just nip and tuck around the corners here and everybody can expect the same old thing. And I just don't think that's the reality. The last thing I just want to add to the conversation, Councillor Grant added it, is I believe we are doing a large disservice to our younger people by not addressing youth and e-scooters. You know, I mean, the average insurance rate they're paying now for a vehicle, $300, $400, $500 a month just to be insured, let alone have this. We're talking about kids getting to school. The 17 to 24, 25-year-olds are using it more and more as an affordable way to get around, and slow rolling our way into it does a real disservice to the youth in our community who need it to get around and find it one of the only affordable things they can have to get around if the bus doesn't work for them. So you know, just trying to stick one up for some of the young kids here who might be looking for a little more urgency than we might be willing to afford them. So but I will leave it there. I did enjoy the report, and thank you very much for all the work that you and staff put into it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. There's been a ton of good questions, and some of mine are going to be a little bit of me too. And I'm going to start with, can we get better maps to be able to better see the projects? That's been a common question from, I don't know, several of the council members ahead of me. The second is on page 40, there's the accident heat map. Does it include the regional roads within it? It seemed to me like Upper Middle Road, there must be a ton of accidents on Upper Middle Road at intersections, and it's not there. Is that intentional?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is intentional. It was intended to identify the town, the constraints on the town facilities and where the needs are on town roads, so that could be incorporated into the strategy. As we were going along and we recognized that there is an opportunity to complete the neighborhood studies, as Commissioner Fu had mentioned, that this fed that was part of the input to that process to identify those needs.
Okay, so I'm looking at the intersection. The reason I'm asking this is because it looked to me like the intersection of Trafalgar and Iroquois Shore, for example, is included in this, but the intersection of Upper Middle and all the other town roads that connect to Upper Middle are not. And so who's catching these intersections? Is it, if it's not us, I hope it's the region, but it feels like a little bit of a who's got which base.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, so there is a big blob, heat blob, right in that just north of Midtown area, and it is either road sections, on town roads approaching regional intersections. So that because there are enough of them, and they may be rear end collisions approaching the intersection, but not classified as intersection Trafalgar Road intersection collisions. It's combined, and there are enough of them that it's created this block.
Okay, and I know that our traffic engineering staff we've been talking about that particular location previously. So does that mean that as soon as it's within the intersection of a regional road, it's over at the region, not at Town Hall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it depends on how it's coded by Halton Police. If it's coded as an intersection collision, or it's coded as a road segment collision, and then that's really where it gets referred.
Okay, I'll leave that alone. Though it would be really nice to see a more complete heat map that shows the regional roads as part of it. Number 3, the active transportation, number 45 on page 87. This is one of these things that maybe a better map would help, but you've got this connection from Laurelwood across the creek, which when I look at the map, I can't really understand what that means. And I wonder if staff could help me understand what that is, going across to Grenville. Because there already is a trail that connects across. And so I'm trying to understand, are we going to build a new bridge? What are we doing? Number 4, the 8th line corridor study. You mentioned corridor studies, but what's the intent there? Are we looking basically at improvements other than widening from Dundas down to Fulgarwood? Because I can't imagine widening 8th line. There's 100 homes that have driveway access directly onto the street.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is intended to look at opportunities to other opportunities other than a widening. So that may be intersection improvements. It may be in consultation with Oakville Transit if bus bays would be acceptable for their operations. Active transportation opportunities within the boulevard that may sort of take some of that activity off of the roadway. So there, and it may be signal optimization. Where we are, as you know, aware of some of the history on 8th line, and I know that there had been truck route studies in the past and concerns about traffic volumes through the neighborhood. So that would be an example of where we would be looking at the corridor study would look at the multimodal level of service and try and balance the needs of alternative modes with traffic.
Okay, thank you. You've put my mind at ease in terms of what would be contemplated as part of something like that. Number 5, the crossing of the 403 between 9th Line and approximately Plymouth, I guess. Is this a new thing that is intended to be more than a multi-use trail kind of connection now? I'm trying to understand what that is on the map.
Yeah, so through you, pardon me, through you, Mr. Mayor, it was initially identified in the 2013 Transportation Master Plan as a road and active transportation connection. It has been on the books. I don't know if it has been ever sort of programmed into the capital program, but is seen really as a longer-term initiative. I think as folks are aware that the widening of Highway 403, that north-south section of Highway 403, is on the books with the ministry, and this would be an opportunity to provide connectivity between Winston Park and the rest of the town, and for circulation and transit, and thank you. Circulation and transit. So all modes. So, you know, that would require an environmental assessment, and all of those elements would be considered at that time.
Okay, so it is intended to be vehicle traffic as well as cycling and pedestrian traffic. Thank you. Number 6, how do regional roads, provincial roads, Metrolinx projects, and their advancement or lack of advancement impact the recommendations of this? So we could do all of these things, but if Metrolinx doesn't carry through with its promises, and the region doesn't do certain things, and the province doesn't do certain things, we might still never meet our objective of getting people around. How do we manage that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is it is a very, I think, important question, and the economic stability of Oakville and the businesses within Oakville will rely, especially goods movement, will rely on the provincial system and to a lesser degree the regional system. And we have looked at a number of strategies, for a couple of hundred strategies for the next 25 years. Many of those have been identified previously and are what we referred to through this process as business as usual. Improvements that have come forward to council, and council has endorsed them in the past, and we're looking at them again and checking to make sure they're still relevant. Implicit in that, and I do believe we have referred to it in the master plan and the alternatives, is advocating other levels of government for improvements, and whether that is improvements to the GO station, improvements to provincial highways, expediting RER. I think all of those are implicitly part of the plan, and we understand that staff regularly are in touch with those levels of government. There really isn't much more that the town can do other than advocate for these improvements, short of spending money and cost-sharing agreements. And we did not see that as a priority for this exercise, or for this plan. And other jurisdictions have done it. They've matched dollars and shared costs with other levels of government. But fundamentally, we felt that the focus was more on travel. With the town's focus and the town's responsibility would be the focus on travel within neighborhoods and between neighborhoods and throughout the town. And notwithstanding that, I know staff have been actively fighting for the Royal Windsor interchange, and that is still a priority.
I think it's sufficient to say perhaps we're at risk of that.
That is true.
Okay.
That is true.
So if others don't carry their weight, then there's going to be holes. Page 95, the bike share program. It suggests this program, and I wonder, is that meant to be with Sheridan College? And have we interacted with them on that? Have they given us any feedback?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't explicitly discussed that. We would anticipate that would be an outcome of the recommendations, but certainly we can, through the implementation phase, which is happening now and over the next month or two, engage Sheridan to see if they have an appetite for that. So we'll definitely make note of that.
Thank you. Sidewalk infill projects, it's been brought up by several of the other council members, and I wonder if we can provide more detail on what kind of advance notice and what kind of interaction we plan with the residents. We've got in our ward a number of projects that I would describe as infill projects that, for example, Gainsborough Drive, Grand Boulevard, Holton Heights Drive, and Grosvenor Street are all projects where there's some validity to the need for sidewalks in some locations, particularly as they approach schools and so forth. But we also have some stretches where there are many homes that they're rural cross-section, not urban cross-section with gutter, for example. And I could imagine there being all kinds of upheaval in trying to introduce sidewalks to those locations where you've got long-term residents who have been there for decades, who are kind of like, well, why are you doing this now? And unless we're contemplating granting them full urbanization and taking away the need to maintain ditches so that there's a benefit to them, it might be a hard sell. And so I wonder if we can get some feedback on the issue of urbanization of some of these streets if we're introducing sidewalks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the question, certainly we can take a look and incorporate the timing of consultation in the form of consultation in the strategy, but Ms. Fu?
So definitely agree that in terms of when we start changing the character of the street, it is something that we will consult with the public on. The transportation master plan is meant for a high level I'll say, a map that everyone want to really dive into. The how will be descriptive. There will be a chapter on how, on implementation, but it wouldn't be the actual implementation itself. So when we actually do go into each individual areas, the staff at the time, whenever that project comes up, we will take a look at all of this. So what we will commit to do, though, is in the transportation master plan, we will describe the how and the guidance on the how, but not the actual doing of the implementation of a specific street.
And when you say how, do you mean the outreach just part of it?
Yeah, so
or-
definitely. So provide more detail on the implementation, advance notice to the residents, ensure that there's evaluation of urbanization, look at the cross-section. Number of the comments that we received today, particularly related to sidewalk infill projects, that we will lay out sort of these are the typical steps that staff in the future when they implement should consider these 10 different things, and then that become I'll say a guiding principle for staff to implement that in the future as they come across each project.
Okay, I heard you say that there would be an evaluation of urbanization. So if that's part of it, then I'm happy.
We will not through the master plan. The master plan would not evaluate whether it will urbanize or not urbanize. The way the master plan look at network is looking at connectivity of the lines.
Yeah.
So that will be a guideline to do the implementation to make sure there's evaluation of urbanization versus not urbanization.
I understand. Today we're talking about the transportation. We're talking about the sidewalk today.
Mm-hmm.
The issue of what does it look like exactly? Does it happen at the same time as an urbanization project, for example? Those are secondary questions. I got that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
got
you
it.
very much.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then my last thing, we've had a ton of discussion about e-scooters. E-skateboards have become a thing, and I've just looking them up, and there's some that go like 45 kilometers an hour. And the scariest thing I saw recently was a couple of, I'd say, college-age individuals going down Trafalgar Road and whipping up McCraney. No helmets, no protective equipment at all, and they're on a skateboard. That's going 45 kilometers an hour down the street. Scary, super scary. Where do those fall? And in terms of regulations, if any, and what's the guidance on them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have to admit I'm not familiar with e-skateboards. If they're motorized and they're on the road, I don't think they are legal. So I don't know how that.
Just looking it up, I understand that they're considered motorized vehicles, and you have to have insurance for them. So I'm pretty sure the answer is no one's doing that.
Counselor, I'm pretty sure they didn't have knee pads, elbow pads, wrist guards.
No.
Never mind the lack of a helmet.
Yeah, exactly. I'll leave that out there.
All right, then we will turn to Counselor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the presentation. You've been 2 hours and 15 minutes on your feet. Are you good to go a little bit longer? Okay, I've only got 20 or so questions. I'm joking, Your Worship. Revisiting the commonly interrogated issue of scooters, I'm surprised at the recommendation about potentially partnering with one of these e-scooter companies. And I'll tell you why. I came back from an AMO conference a number of years ago, super excited by this concept. I tried them out and I met with the people that were marketing them. There's 3 or 4 companies that were selling them. And I put something on social media and I got trashed by the general public. They didn't want these things. They'd see them in other communities. They lay about on people's lawns and such. So I'm just curious, what was the rationale for including a public or a rental scheme as part of your proposal here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is, I think, a common approach of the municipalities in Ontario that have opted in. It provides the vehicles, the e-scooters. It manages, where they're going to be, how they're handled, as opposed to a town-operated facility, scooters. So it provides a supply. It allows for a management of the supply. I have to admit I was not sort of front and center on this specific item, but there are sort of the risk issues that were raised and liability issues that were raised. So I mean, we can be more explicit in the report on that specific decision, but that is the standard approach of pretty much every jurisdiction that has.
From my perspective, I like the idea. And I like the idea of codifying in some fashion e-scooters that are individually owned as well. I was just surprised to see it because I know that speaking to other colleagues, particularly at I serve on a national policing board, and I know that there's been a lot of conversation about enforcement and such, and it's the bane of many communities' existence, these rental schemes. But I'm curious to see how this plays out. I assume this will be tested in some sort of public consultation before we would engage in something like this.
Through
I think the
you.
commissioner's going to rescue your worry.
Yeah. E-scooter, my favorite topic. So, yes, for any rollout of an e-scooter program, including opting into the pilot, it will be fully consulted with the public. Just for clarity for the earlier conversations. So the need to opt in, it means that we want to regulate and allow e-scooters. Right now, for the town, as in the presentation, we don't allow e-scooter, period. Whether it looks like e-skater, e-skateboard, or motorized bikes, none of them are allowed. Even the one that the province allow you to have, if you're in the opt-in, in that one picture that we showed you, is not allowed here in Oakville. So the intent here is that when we do go down this 3-year program on page 97, we're going to explore the bylaw. We're going to look at, obviously, we only allow what the province allowed. Everything else is not allowed, but is purchasable by someone on Toys R Us all the way to Amazon. But the key thing here in speaking with regional police is that if we're opt-in, it will be much easier for them to enforce. At this point, they don't have the resources to be chasing after every e-scooter or e-skateboarder down the street. So I think the rental program, to your question, is that it's just another way, as I mentioned, the last mile, first mile, to allow people to use micromobility. It's just another option of traveling. So if we put a frame around it, a gate around it, or a control bylaw around it, we could better manage it, whether we partner with someone or we just allow it generally when someone purchases something. But it's, at least when you partner with someone, you know they're partnering with something that is allowed, as opposed to allow the general public to buy whatever that's on the internet. So,
but we're going to distinguish between the codification, the regulation, and a potential participation in a rental program. Okay, good. Okay.
It's two separate things, and then we'll have to look at how to deal with that, and we'll definitely learn from the neighboring municipalities of the experience they're learning.
Through this process, will we also be addressing e-bikes? Because I know that the province had a pilot on this a number of years ago. And I think to this very day, there's still a lot of confusion in the public as to whether they're legal, are they not legal, where can they go, where they can't go. I get probably, a couple times a year, I get questions from constituents wanting to understand before they make a purchase. Will we be addressing that at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
The e-bikes right now for Oakville is not allowed.
Right, even though the province, under the Highway Traffic Act, stipulates that they are allowed, or was that rescinded after the pilot was over?
I believe it's not part of the e-scooter pilot at this point.
Right, but there was an e-bike pilot a few years ago.
However, my understanding is, and we could double check that and get back to council with that, the e-bikes are not allowed.
Okay. Well, great. We'll get more information on that as we go. So my next question was on police consultation. Has that actually occurred yet? Have the police service staff been involved in some of these regulatory pieces in this document?
We already met with police actually on 3 different occasions that I myself was participating, at least in 2, to discuss how we even deal with the e-scooter phenomenon that's currently in Oakville. So yes, they have been involved in how we even deal with the day-to-day at this point. And certainly they're part of our stakeholder, and they do recommend that the town eventually, when we're ready, opt in to the e-scooter pilot similar to other municipalities. And we just took a more pragmatic approach in terms of starting with education, look at our network before we opt in.
I know from a police governance perspective, again, from my involvement in the Canadian Association of Police Governance, this is a topic that comes up from time to time, and it is something that police services are aware of. They work with their municipalities, but they effectively say, and they probably say the same thing to you, don't expect us to put a lot of resources in enforcement because we can't be chasing after every 12-year-old on a scooter. So
That's correct. They already confirmed that with us, that they just cannot be enforcing e-scooters. And to earlier Councillor Hassassio's point about is MES part of that enforcement strategy, those are all the different things that we're going to look at in the next 3 years.
great. My next question is with respect to, Commissioner, you're aware of my concerns around this, and I think the CAO too, is snow storage. I know that that's a strange thing to talk about in terms of transportation, but when it snows, our transportation plan goes out the door to much extent because you have to get rid of the snow. We do a really good job in dealing with the roads, but what we don't do a great job on is clearing the infrastructure necessary for public transportation, buses, et cetera. Well, I know that you're working on that, and I know the transit commissioner is working on, or the transit director is working on that as well, with some contractual changes. Should this not be part of this conversation as well to talk about ensuring that the infrastructure, and I did actually a Boolean search on this document to see how often snow came up, and I didn't see much in terms of dealing with snow removal.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, there will be a section in the overall plan that we're working on the operation and maintenance costs of all of the infrastructure that is planned in this plan. So we want to make sure there's total life cycle considerations, not just planning for all the networks, and yet we don't look at rehabilitation, replacement, as well as the maintenance and operations of it. So to your point, Councillor Knoll, the O&M will be part of that, and certainly snow removal is only one aspect of O&M. We have to make sure we're making sure all the road sweeping, all the catch basins, all of those good stuff are being done. And that would be considered as a unit cost in here to build into the future, I'll say, operational and capital planning.
Okay. Parking in North Oakville. So Councillor Hassasio raised the issue of parking in downtown, the challenges around that, and as downtown becomes more and more successful and recovers from a few years ago when it was a little less successful, we've certainly seen challenges in downtown. We have another area in town where we're starting to see an emergence of this, and that's the uptown core. We're already starting to see, well, if you look at your collisions map, you'll see a nice big blob right in the middle of the uptown core, that there's been a number of traffic incursions. If you drive in the uptown core, you'll see streets, for example, Taunton Road is congested with cars parked on the side of the street. They're visitors to both the condominiums that are there as well as to the businesses located at the bottom of them. In our infinite wisdom, and thanks to the OLT, we've never properly planned for visitor parking in these spaces. What are we going to do in terms of maybe establishing at some point a parking authority? I know we've talked about this for 20-odd years in the uptown core particularly, but even when you take that into consideration potentially over time in Palermo too, if we're looking at a 41 time horizon, how are we going to approach that? Because we're already starting to see challenges in the uptown core as it densifies, and we're going to see additional ones around parking, around even just being able to move around, being able to have accessibility to the transit terminal, for example, is going to have impacts as well as time goes on. And my bigger concern, not the power center portion, but it's actually the ring road that is starting to build out with condos and such with retailers, and there's been no real consideration given to parking. And I know, speaking with Mr. Maneri as we talk about the uptown core, we've been talking about potentially providing public parking in that facility. So how are we going to address that, and is that something that is part of your scope of your study?
Maybe I'll pass it to Vivi.
Parking is another topic, my favorite.
No, it's not. That's not true.
Well, that was a lot to organize. So let me try with this. So the transportation master plan is generally looking at the roads in the road corridor It does look at some TDM strategies in terms of curbside management, how we deal with parking on the curbside, deliveries and whatnot. However, the transportation master plan actually is not addressing a parking supply or parking management issue. So generally, it doesn't get into the parking pieces. We have collectively with planning, we're working on variety and MES on variety of parking reviews and studies. Particularly, for example, we have the downtown supply study is one of on the council strat plan. That is something that we're taking a look at the downtown area. For all of the growth areas through the planning work, we always look at the planning, the parking requirements, standards, but recognizing we don't have minimum parking situations in terms of requirements anymore from our developers, we will have to circle back. I think what you're trying to say is staff needs to take it back, circle back on some of the area that's already built and how are we dealing with parking in those areas. As you're aware that we have looked at parking in some of the BIA areas, but as you mentioned, Uptown Core is becoming an issue. So we certainly could take it back and take a look at the parking situation there. But unfortunately, that was out of the scope for the TMP. And we'll take it back as a note to look at parking around the Uptown Core.
Yeah, I understand your point and accept it very clearly about parking is a separate issue, and it's a dirty word around here in many ways. But the parking is only one piece of that, of course. It's the constriction of roads as a result of parking, which does have a direct impact on transportation. It's the number of collisions you're seeing in the area. It's how it's how you're going to get from point A to point B and what is supposed to be a walkable community. I think it requires a really close look, and both to potentially ameliorate the issues in Uptown Core, but also learn as we move closer and closer to a Palermo node, which will have similar characteristics, I suspect.
Oh, definitely. In terms of the overall parking, and I'll put my hoping to be planner hat on for a minute. It's about the land use. It's about how much parking we provide, and then what is the right-of-way width, and then how we deal with the curbside, and how we deal with temporary parking. All of that actually tied together holistically, and it does impact transportation. Transportation is only one aspect of it. It really got to do with land use, providing people options to go places so they're not driving, they don't have to park, they could walk, they could active transportation themselves there. So the transportation master plan actually look at the different way to get people around and hoping for them to not have to really worry about parking. But the reality is people do drive and they do need to look at parking. So we'll look at it holistically, whether we plan either a subdivision growth nodes such as Palermo, and then we apply. What's the key here for this plan is we look at the pages with all the dots where the TDMs are. Those are the strategies of all the TDM strategies that we want to apply and we want to utilize either as staff or developers to include in their plan so we can manage parking better. So it is actually holistic. It's just that we're not literally looking at the parking specific street about parking or supplies of parking or management and parking in this plan. I hope that.
It helps. I just want to, last word on that is I just want to make sure that those parking issues don't grind to a halt, the ability to be able to move in an active and a transportation basis, because I think we're approaching that. I know downtown has those sorts of issues, and I'm afraid the Uptown Core is going to see the same fate unless we get in front of it soon.
Definitely noted, and staff is fully aware of all the different aspects we have to plan around parking.
Okay. And see what I did there? I intentionally asked questions the commissioner would answer to give you a break, so you're welcome. Thank you very much for your answers. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor McNeice.
Thank you, through your worship, and thanks for fielding all our questions there for it seems like a couple hours here. I guess I'll start on e-bikes, just like everybody else. If you don't mind just pulling up that slide there, the e-bike slides. So just your box on the bottom right there, connotating what's not considered an e-scooter. You know, you notice things like someone throws a basket on it, and now it's not an e-scooter. many different variations, and I think someone mentioned, I mean, you can go to Toys R Us or Amazon and buy all of these, and I don't think we're going to be able to stop the supply. Did you point that out to sort of say to us, we got to do some advocacy to the province to start classifying these things maybe together or separately, or because we do some intergovernmental advocacy. Is that sort of the message you're trying to pass along?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, really the intent was to sort of clarify, because there is such a wide range of motorized vehicle types, that we just clarify to council what is in and what is out of the pilot program. So from that, I mean, we will, if the town opts in and starts implementing, these issues may sort of come to light, and you know, for the good or the bad of the operations, I would imagine that the town would consult with the province on sort of the longer term life of e-scooter management. And that may be, yes, we're seeing a broader range of e-scooter type vehicles, and that's okay, or we're seeing a broader range and we have these issues. So it wasn't intentional to advocate at this point, but more to just to clarify and define.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. And maybe just a note to staff, I think we have our intergovernmental coming up. In case we forget, we might want to, I'm sure there's others that are experiencing this as well. And I believe, I forget which councillor mentioned the e-skateboards, and I saw some other e-device when I was coming here with, young kids on it. So it's going to keep evolving. And I believe the e-scooter pilot keeps getting extended. I know it was supposed to wrap up, I think, last year, but let's make sure we're working with others to maybe more broadly define or help regulate and make it safer for as many of these groups as possible. If you wouldn't mind jumping to, I think it was your 9th slide, alternatives and preferred solutions. So I remember in the consultation, I think we did some engagement around it, and I forget if it was a democracy type thing, but I think we were trying to get feedback on which of the preferred options, Oakville residents and community stakeholders, think should be our direction. And I noticed in the bubble on the side, we sort of said, well, we'll sort of focus on a combination of all of them. And maybe that's the right approach. And I know through the questioning that, we've heard the region will kind of, work on the interregional things as well as metro links, and maybe the town's more on 1 and 2. But I think it would be good to know if we did get, survey results or feedback, does the community want to be very, number one, very neighborhood centric, sort of walk and bike everywhere, or have that, 10-minute community? Or are we looking to better connect neighborhoods? And I realize we'll do a bit of both, but, when you try to do everything well, you start to lose focus, I think, a little bit. So if it's a directional document, I think that might be some helpful feedback.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a couple more questions. I was pleased to see the multimodal level of service, because obviously the regular level of service focused on vehicles moving. Would we be developing a metric for it, or is there sort of like an industry standard across municipalities, or would it be sort of an Oakville standard that we create?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was an exercise that was done by the Ontario Traffic Council, I want to say 3 years ago. And it is a document that's available, and the Ontario Traffic Council is really an organization of municipal transportation staff, elected officials, and police services. And this document is really the framework, and it explains the methodology. It defines, different ways of measuring levels of service for different modes. But it should be, and what we're proposing is a sort of a made in Oakville version of that has thresholds and topologies that match the streets of the town of Oakville. So that is the intent, and it's again laid out as a tool for staff to implement at a project level.
Okay, and if, I mean, it'd be great to know, if that's just the one standard or there's other standards. I mean, I've been involved in initiatives where you bring in sort of public health, people to help you understand, community safety and the benefits of walking, biking, things like that. And you see other benefits from, your neighborhoods and your communities being more multimodal. But yeah, so I guess that holistic perspective would be great. I'm glad that you mentioned flex streets. I saw it had one mention in the document there. And you mentioned the schools, which is an interesting idea. Now, I think a few of our BIAs have sort of talked about it. We have, downtown a farmer's market on the street. In the Bronte area, we do some events on the streets, and we have some streets that don't have curb cuts or driveways that are perfectly designed, but when we want to utilize it, we have to go through, a costly permit process, hire police and things like that, that it's almost cost prohibitive. Would the intent of this be to identify those streets that are ideal for easier closings, safer closings, to be used for festivals or events as well?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that would be the objective of an initiative like that. And there are a range of treatments, and I don't know if folks are familiar with James Street in Hamilton. I think it was somewhat of an organic occurrence, but staff embraced it, and it's quite a bit of a celebration of the neighborhood every month. But the School Streets initiative is something that's really happening across the country. There's a number of organizations that have really championed it, and depending on the community, there really are opportunities there. So, a study and an investigation could identify pilots for school streets. It could identify some of the operational issues of enforcement and traffic management associated with any form of those flex streets, because it is a bit can be a bit of a challenge.
So it would look at all forms, because I know some remove the curb and they try to have the bollards to allow traffic one day, wider patios the next day, full closure for event. I think Barrie has it on their main street. So the full gamut is what you're saying. Yeah, I see Commissioner Fu. Yeah.
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor, regarding if the TMP will provide you which street will become either a flex street or school street, that will not be happening at the TMP level. What the TMP does is provide the guiding principle and the definition of each of these streets and identify future studies that need to be done in order to identify which street in Oakville become flex street, which street in Oakville becomes school street. So this is very similar to Park and Rec Master Plan. They have about 90 studies that they have to do. We also have many, many studies that we'll have to do that actually implement, I'll say, the principles and the guidelines, and I'll say the topology that the recommendation that's coming out of TMP.
Okay, so I hear the full gamut. So one last variant of that, open streets, which I know is sort of, Bloor in Toronto, it's sort of more of a festival or a celebration that, as I think about culture change, realizing the streets are for all modes. Is that considered a flex street, or would that be in the gamut of exploration, or are we talking about something different there?
Through you. Oh.
Sorry, through Councilor Manise. Sorry, through Mr. Mayor. We would not be able to identify which street will fit or not fit. As I mentioned, we have to do a study to evaluate which street will fit or not fit. So it will be difficult for Ray to comment on very specific streets today, but we'll have criteria as to which street becomes.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get at the types of flex type streets, so I mean, we hear schools, we hear, for events, and I just wanted to, bring forward the open street, which is more, I think, of a shorter term thing that, might not happen as often, but has a slightly different purpose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not as familiar with if you're talking about Bloor West in Toronto, or is it?
I'll follow up. It's
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but James is a great example. Okay. I know the Danforth in Toronto, James Street in Hamilton, the Danforth in for events, and even Bloor West in Toronto
Okay.
for events. They're basically closed streets, I think what we would call, maybe open streets is a more inviting term, but closed streets is, I think, the term
Right,
that we've
yes.
used in this document. So if you have any thoughts on additions to what you see in the document, we can certainly expand on it.
Okay. Now, just going to some of the maps, I also had a hard time sort of zooming in far enough, but I think I saw a gap in multimodal trail, basically pavement beside a sidewalk. So, on the west side of Oakville, Lakeshore and Burloak, we start a sort of multi-use trail on the north side of Lakeshore that goes to South Shell Park and then Shell Park. Then it gets to about Cudmore Street, and the pavement beside the sidewalk disappears, and probably just lane width and stuff. Now, come West River Street, I believe is the boundary for the streetscaping for Brawny Village, but it leaves about 3 blocks, and I realize it's going to be a challenge, but I think we should identify that there is a gap there if we're trying to, really get a thorough connection along Lakeshore. So approximately north side of Lakeshore, approximately Cudmore to West River, I think is sort of a gap that's not in any of the maps from what I can see. So, and I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McNeice. Councillor Shia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. This is a great report. I really appreciate the staff's effort for preparing this report. So I will guarantee my questions are short and quick. So first one, still many questions about this e-scooter. So I noted there's 3 years plan. So I assume this, so when we'll start this plan? Is supposed to this year or next year? Because the provincial pilot program is in 2029, right?
So the timeline to complete the TMP is in the fall this year. So our plan is to start year 1 on the page 97 will be 2026.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you. My second question is on the report, page 45. So we're talking about the complete streets. So can you explain this or give me visualize that what is complete street, and can you give some example in our town or the great GTA or Canada if we have this kind of a complete street?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So complete streets is a sort of a generic term for providing balance between accommodation of different modes of travel. So vehicles and transit and cycling and pedestrians, along with other features like streetscaping and utilities, and et cetera. It may take different forms based on the function of that street. So a complete street through a residential neighborhood might be different than a complete street through a commercial area. And that's where the topologies come in. So you define the topology, and that shifts the balance between those modes, but it's still intended to be balanced. So the work that was done on Lakeshore, for example, in the downtown, was a great example, and it sort of reimagined it. Things didn't change that much, but there is space for parking, and there is space for very short-term parking. There is a clear pedestrian way. There are elements of streetscape there, and I mean, Lakeshore started from a reasonably good place. I mean, it was a much better, result after the project. But if you could take that model and move it to another street, and I think we often think of third line, it can be, and I know that there are some images that we shared earlier in this process. If third line were widened to from a 4-lane to a 6-lane facility, it would not be a complete street. It would simply have enough room for a narrow sidewalk beside the fences or noise walls, and then a lot of pavement for traffic. There is an opportunity to have some streetscaping to buffer a multi-use path on one side and a very generous sidewalk on the other side. There may be opportunities for more space for transit facilities and that sort of thing. So it varies based on the function of the road, but the intent is the same, that it provides a balance between the modes.
Okay, so based on the North Oakville's density, so is there any different consideration about that? How to accomplish those things?
Well, the rights of way are narrower, so you're balancing with less room to fit everything in. But again, there are different definitions of streets within North Oakville, and it really would function. And in some instances, you may not be able to fit a cycling facility in because of the constraints of the right of way, but you'd make that decision within the context of what that road is, what that street is intending to do and provide, and what the land uses are adjacent to it. So again, it's really a lens, and you're revisiting the road with all of these options without the assumption that it's 30 meters, you can squeeze 4 lanes in there. It's what do you do with that space and how do you balance it?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, a couple of quick questions. It's been a long time. You mentioned the 403 expansion from the QEW North. Was there any timing on that proposed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that there is. There was a preliminary design report completed by the province.
Yes. No, that's good.
But
just
yeah, we don't.
I think it was public information meeting at the Galaxy 707 in 2012 that they first unveiled those plans. The neighborhood studies, great, looking forward to it. Can we learn from that, or have other municipalities learned for new developments when there's a school, sidewalks, a parquet, whatever? Is that a learning opportunity for our friends in planning in terms of what makes a better neighborhood or a safer neighborhood?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, these neighborhood studies are not that common in other jurisdictions. It's quite often a sort of a town-wide study, or as Commissioner Fu had mentioned, that there would be elements of studies that would be done. So I think that as the first couple are developed, there will be an opportunity for the public to provide input, for the town to have a better understanding of what's working for the community and what's not working for the community. And I definitely think that would be information to help planning future communities.
And further to Councillor McNeese's question, he talked about the Lakeshore Trail. What about, I'm just curious what we've looked at in terms of our friends in Mississauga and over in Burlington. Mississauga has the 9 Creek Trail that would connect very well on our eastern side, and they have the Centennial Bikeway that leads you through and directly into downtown. It looks like we have some possible connections from the Ford plant over and hopefully Midtown. Will that be included in this in terms of possible timelines to have a complete system go through?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are a number of, on Lakeshore, there are a number of reviews that have occurred. There was a study on the previous study by the town on the eastern side. There are elements in the west side, I know, that have been sort of going on for a while. So we have looked at all of the components and looked at the opportunity, and the streetscape study, of course, and looked at all of those elements and looked for opportunities to provide connectivity. There are a couple of locations, I think, that were mentioned that are gaps that we are trying to fill. But as we would move forward, similar to the study that was done in the East End, and the streetscape study, there are opportunities to address those missing or those missing elements there.
All right, thank you. And you mentioned the Queen Elizabeth. Oh, sorry, Commissioner.
Oh, sorry. I'm like thinking while I'm pressing buttons. Sorry. The Lakeshore Corridor is a very important corridor for us for our AT. With the variety of study that has been done between the trail map and as well as the off-road, on-road, off-road, the intent is for overall connectivity, but it is a recognition similar to the trail that goes all the way downtown. Sometimes you have to hop. Sometimes you have to go closer to the road, sometimes you go off the road. Like there's times where you have to kind of go on a more of a trail-like, sometimes on MUPs, and sometimes you have to take a short distance on the road. So it is intended through the master plan recommendation, though, to have a continuity, but you may have different, I'll say, infrastructure types as you traverse through Lakeshore.
Certainly, understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
You talked about the Queen Elizabeth and the growth projections. Those of us that are along the QEW, we certainly see the issues as it's an EDR, and you never know what's going to happen. It's difficult to use it for me to move, go over toward wonderful at any time, because it's much like the 401. It's not bypassing Toronto anymore. Mm-hmm. You've got the projections out a decade or 15 years, was that?
25 years.
25 years. Yeah. Realizing that working from home and Zoom and Teams has had, and co-working spaces has had some effect, probably largely offset or more so by those that are driving till they can afford a home. Does it factor in the electrification of the GO lines? I'm just wondering what sense of surety we will have, I think, further to Councillor Lischenna's question. What level of surety do we have in that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this study started in a sort of an interesting time, and with the effects of COVID and some of the changes that you have referred to. And it was challenging, just in terms of traffic forecasting and understanding how sticky this change in behavior will be, and also, what does it mean for transit in the longer term? Because we did see that decline in transit through COVID and even early post-COVID. We have used the model, the regional transportation model, or a sub-area of it, to forecast future demand. And in our sort of base years, which are still sort of post-COVID, we had made some adjustments based on what we saw from traffic levels and from the streetlight data, which is the app-based origin destination data. We saw a decline, and we calibrated our model with that decline, but we took it out in the long term, anticipating that people's behaviors will sort of go back to the way they typically were, which is a conservative assessment. So maybe it will give some comfort to council that if there is this sort of longer term adjustment, and we saw a sort of a 10 to 15% reduction even in 2023 when we were doing some of this analysis, if there is a level of comfort, increased level of comfort with work at home or alternative work hours, that may bring down some of the traffic levels, certainly in the peak hours that we saw. So we have analyzed this, with the assumption that things will go back, but there is the possibility that we'll see more modest, sort of regular commutes. I think there's a potential upside there. I think there's, again, an opportunity for the town and others to encourage this type of behavior.
That's great. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Nanda.
Thank you through you, Mayor Burton. Thank you so much for the presentation and all the slew of information that you've already provided. I just have a couple of points and a couple of questions. I will just start with the e-scooters again. Surprisingly, I still have a question. I noticed that in Mississauga for their micro-mobility project that they were doing, I think they just met at council last week, and they said that their first year of the project was complete chaos, and that they're looking at if the second year is the same, that they want to scrap the program. Do you have more information on that program?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is something that we're still collecting information on. We have sort of earlier in this process, maybe 6 to 8 months ago, had sort of compiled our research on other jurisdictions. But given the findings in Mississauga, I live in Mississauga, so I sort of see the e-scooters everywhere. I think there, whatever lessons that they have learned, we would certainly tap into.
Yeah, because I'd like to know, it was a rental program, obviously, for the e-scooters and e-bikes. So was that enforced by MES or was that enforced by police or both? Like what enforcement was done under that program as well, right? Because I think what we always come back to is there's always a big strain on MES. And so when we're looking at potential projects or what we want to do, we realize that we usually don't have enough staff or personnel to enforce these type of projects. So I think that's going to be important to look at as well. So yeah, if we looked at that Mississauga project, that would be good. I was still very surprised to see that 85% of the population is still using cars, and we're still trying to work on this project that we're going to bring this down. And so I wanted to just bring to attention again, because I have in the past, on page 21, we were talking about North Oakville, again, as we always do. And it says, we're looking at the North Oakville East Secondary Plan, and it includes establishment of an efficient and linked safe pedestrian movement system, cycleways and walkways, along with an appropriate distribution of land uses so that residents do not need to rely on automobile to meet the recreational, shopping, and commuter needs of daily life. It promotes transit first. I have to emphasize that I have lived in North Oakville for 11 years, and none of this has worked in my experience. And I think we continue to try to use North Oakville as an example of complete communities and what we're doing. We were talking about schools, and yes, everybody drops their kids off, especially in the winter. In the summer, it might get a little lighter, but there's more to the issue with schools than just parents dropping kids off. We are overpopulated, very overpopulated in our schools. And what happens is that the teachers that are coming to these schools are coming from outside our municipality. So they're all driving in. So you have all these cars, and now you have more teachers. We don't have enough parking spaces within the school. So they require permits to park on residential streets. So you have cars parked on residential streets of the teachers. You have parents dropping off kids at the same time. You have kids being bussed in from other neighborhoods. So it is complete chaos in the mornings. I think we need to do more of a study around schools. And I know that we have been doing some work, and we're looking at some new roadways and what we're going to put to try to slow down traffic, but also pedestrian safe way. 3 weeks ago, a 15-year-old girl was killed in Scarborough because she was hit by a car on a crosswalk across the school. And the first thing the community came out and said is, we've said for a very long time that road safety has been an issue in the area. So I concur that even when I drop off my kids, I almost need to watch them cross the street on the pedestrian crossway to ensure that nothing's going to happen, because there's just so many cars going through. But I think the other issue is how we are planning these neighborhoods. You know, we're planning them very densely. And so it's true, cars trying to come in and out and pass each other, it's just not working, I would say, around the schools. So if we could please look into that. And I think Councillor Chisholm said it, earlier, which was a really good point. As the population is going up, we are going to get more cars, and as more people can afford cars, they are going to continue to buy cars. We're not seeing less of that in North Oakville. We're actually seeing more of that because people are trying to get more permits in the north to park on streets because they have 3-4 cars. So we're not even looking at 1.8. It's more like 2 or 2 point something per household. And then we're putting into that more condos and more density. So in terms of transportation, we really do need to look into that. I was happy to see that we're looking at the transit way for Neagawa. That's very important because now we're putting more population into that. And I'm hoping that we can all do more advocacy for all the transit areas that we need within Oakville all around. And I think those were my points. So I do thank you for the report, but if we could look into more work around schools as well, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm, welcome back.
Thank you. I'll make it short. I want to circle back to the e-bikes or the e-scooters and everything else. I'm really having a problem with this. And the point was taken with Phoebe saying the e-bikes are not allowed. Well, sorry, folks, they're out there, and there's no enforcement on this stuff. It's the wild, wild west with some of this stuff that's going on the roadways. And it's like anything. Yes, we have the e-scooters, basic e-scooters, but what happens through evolution, they're getting bigger and they're getting better and they're getting faster. I've seen this in the last 4 or 5 years, the basic ones now. And contrary to Councillor Grant saying that they don't go fast, well, they do. And I've seen it. Matter of fact, I have a friend whose car was totaled in the back by an e-scooter hitting it. And the poor 17-year-old is still in the hospital today because of it. So the bottom line here is, with e-scooter, we need to have it classifications for these e-scooters. It's not just e-bikes, these small e-bikes, and also these little motorized scooter, two-wheeler, like motorcycles, little small ones. They think it's acceptable too because e-scooters are out there. So, and I guess the question has to be asked. I'm going to ask Phoebe, and Phoebe, you made the comment with respect to enforcement. Right now, if I understand it, if they're on our sidewalks, we can enforce it through our municipal enforcement. But if it's on the roadway, it's the police. And what I'm hearing, the police are not going to spend time trying to, close down a 15-year-old on his scooter. Is that correct?
That's through you, Mr. Chair. If any of these, I'll say, micromobility vehicles, it could be e-bike, e-scooter, e-skateboard, they're technically not supposed to be on our sidewalks. They're prohibited from our sidewalks. Now, MES does not have the resources to go out and enforce anyone who is riding these vehicles on sidewalks. On the road, they're also, I want to clarify my earlier comment, e-bikes, if it's has all these classifications on the municipal MTO website, is allowed if it's a regular bike. So it has to be maximum of speed of 32 kilometers, and it has to be maximum weight of certain kilograms. So e-bike is allowed if our bike is allowed on the road. So, but as you can imagine, everyone already use different terminologies, and that's what the confusion is. Your e-bike is not the same as my e-bike. The e-bike we show on the picture that has a little basket and a seat, to somebody that's an e-bike, but to me that's not an e-bike, that's an e-scooter. So you can see all this confusion. So your point well taken, that we need to clearly classify what, using pictures, what is what and what is allowed, what's not allowed. So then your last point question about the road, the Halton Police does not have any time, and Councillor No confirmed it earlier, they don't have the time to go reinforce e-bikes, e-motorcycles, e-scooters, e-anything that's on the road. They just don't have that kind of resources, whether they're driving 15 kilometers or 40 kilometers. So I certainly hear you that this is a major problem. And this is something we have to tackle.
Sorry, Phoebe, let me jump in there. So the police won't do it. We can't do it. So we're putting in a new system on our roadways, and we can't enforce it. So is there negotiation or discussions through our master plan with the ministry to talk about how we're going to manage this or enforce this? I can understand we're looking at this as our connection to our roadways and adding this and so forth. But on the other hand, on the human behavioral side, we don't seem to have any idea what we're going to do with this.
Through you, Mayor Burton, at this point in time, we're not recommending that we use the e-scooters. We're going to take the opportunity the first year to do the education, follow along what other municipalities have done, and there'll be a conversation with council on how we should proceed after that. So very good points, Councillor Chisholm, and you'll have an opportunity to weigh in on those as we move forward in the second year of the program. One thing I just wanted to clarify with municipal enforcement, it's not, they don't have resources to do it, but more importantly, they don't have the capability, especially for the youth, to ask for information in order to lay any kind of charges. So I have some legal limitations in terms of what MES can do.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I guess the question is, we do have bike tracks or bike lanes now. We have them on Spears Road. The e-scooters, are they allowed to go on that track?
No, no e-scooter is allowed anywhere in Oakville.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay, so okay, let's take a next step here. If we have the approval of e-scooter,
Councillor, as in other things, we have authority and jurisdiction in some areas, and we wish we had authority and jurisdiction in other areas.
Right.
And sometimes the art of this job is to tell them apart.
Correct. Okay, my last question is this. When we move down the roadway, no pun intended, with respect to design standards, so there would be design standards for when we get into this whole area, adding it to our modal applications. Would that be a correct assumption? We would have different design concepts?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, one of the recommendations of the Transportation Master Plan is for the town to revisit the engineering standards. And it would be in light of, the Complete Streets approach and just changes in design elements for even bicycle facility design. But micromobility, I think, is a very valid point. Micromobility and e-scooters, that review should take what is coming into account.
Yeah, I guess just in my own personal perspective, you're going to see a major increase in micromobility, but with the cars and so forth, I don't see a great decline in it. I'd see it flattening out for a while, but I don't see that happening. So it's going to be an interesting next in the future how we're going to combine all this and make it safe for our community. I leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. It's interesting trying to balance the belief that micro-mobility isn't going to take any cars off the road, i.e. not amount to much, and the belief that we've got to get cars off the road. So that's fun. It's clear that we do have a lobbying job to do with the provincial government, because after all, they've got the authority. And I don't know that we can stop people from buying these things. That's another lack of authority that we have. So it's going to be interesting seeing how we work all this out. And Councillor McNeice, I was going to ask you for a motion to go past the hour, but I'm joking. Please don't give me one.
Through your worship, I can't resist with one more e-scooter question, but I'll make it really quick. So the 3-year program there, so year 1 education, now are we educating people of the current laws that they can't use it, or are we educating them that we're going to be developing something, or so I'm just a little confused on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there is a general lack of understanding of where the pilot, and this is the provincial pilot, what it permits and what it doesn't permit, what is an e-scooter under the pilot legally and what is not. I think there is general safety information that we can share, and that just the lessons learned from other jurisdictions, I think, is relevant as well.
But we will not have signed up for the pilot at that point. Is that the thinking?
That's the understanding. Yes. Yep.
Okay. I imagine that'll come back to us for more discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I can volunteer that nothing I've heard tonight makes me want to participate in the pilot. I'm gonna turn to Councillor Longo and ask him if he'd provide us the motion to receive the presentation and the comments. Thank you, Councillor Longo. Is anybody objecting to that motion? Anybody want to keep going?
Don't bother asking staff to repeat everything.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. I will not do that. I'm confident they've heard us, and they do have the recording should they have missed anything. Madam Clerk, there being no objections seen to Councillor Longo's motion, it carries, and I thank him for it. And good news, Council, that ends the work of the evening, and it ends the meeting. It's been great working with you. I look forward to the next opportunity. Good night.